A Woman's Confession-Sentimental Schizophrenia. Prologue. I don't know exactly when I started to lose myself. Maybe one quiet night, while I was washing dishes and listening to the news in the background, or maybe the morning I looked in the mirror and realized I was just smiling out of habit. Maybe it was earlier than that. Maybe I lost myself since childhood, when I learned that I had to be good, to keep my knees together and my eyes down. I was a wife.A, decent woman, a mother, housewife. Always careful not to be too much, too desirous, too alive, too sincere. But inside me, there has always been a hunger. Not one for food, not one for things, but a hunger for touch, for looks that burn, for moments that break time in two, a hunger to be seen, touched, desired without shame. I lived my life divided between what I should and what I feel, between the vows spoken at the altar and the body that demanded more than what it received. Not because I was not loved, but because that love did not know how to speak the language of my skin. This is not a story with heroes or heroines.It is not a justification, nor a tearful drama.It is, simply, a confession, a woman, a double life, a thirst, a search. The truth told in a whisper, in bed, in the mirror, in letters that were never sent. Maybe you will find yourself. Maybe you will rebel, or maybe you will close the book and you will wonder if you have the courage to tell the truth. I tell it now. Without a mask. Without pity. This is my confession. And I write it not because I have to, but because there is nothing else left to do. Chapter 1. Hunger. Since I was little, I knew that something lived in my body that I couldn't explain. A warm tension, a shiver in my flesh, an anxiety that crept into my thoughts without me being able to control it. It wasn't pain, but it wasn't peace either. It was a need, hunger. Not a hunger for food, not for sweets, not for toys. It was a hunger for touch. For presence. Of closeness. Ever since the age when other little girls were drawing butterflies and prom dresses, I dreamed of fingers walking on my back, lips that pressed against my shoulders, a voice that spoke my name slowly, in a whisper, like a prayer murmured between two breaths. But I quickly learned to hide. Because the world doesn't love girls who feel too much. In school, in my family, in my circle of friends, I was taught that a girl must be good. This word was spoken to me severely dozens of times. A good girl doesn't touch herself. A good girl doesn't caress her neck in the silence of the night. A good girl doesn't feel shameful things. So I learned to smile beautifully, to keep my knees together, to wear longer skirts and lower gazes. But in me, the fire didn't burn. Extinguished.It gathered in my chest, between my hips, in my dreams. I remember the nights I lay awake, my heart beating too fast, while my hands searched for the truth. I didn't know what I was doing, I just felt my body asking for it. And I didn't want to betray it in the dark, with the door locked. I was learning what it meant to be a woman without anyone telling me. First I felt guilt. Then, only pleasure. Over time, pleasure became my silent refrain, a form of freedom, an escape from rules and fears. I knew I wasn't allowed to desire. But desire doesn't ask for permission, it comes. And in my case, it stays. Adolescence was a prison with colored walls. While my peers were discovering love with small steps, with clumsy emotions, I was already living in complex fantasies. I imagined touches, scenarios, gestures that I had never seen, but felt so real on my skin. I was attracted by every detail. A tanned hand, an elegant ankle, a low voice. I imagined what it would be like to be trapped in a corner by the wall, stared at intensely, touched as if I had never been touched before. And all this, without even kissing a boy. I learned my body early. I explored it carefully, with fear, then with boldness. I knew my every twitch, every sensitive area, every way it could say yes without words. But the outside world didn't want to hear about it, so I learned to be two women, one for the world, with decent dresses and a restrained smile, and another for myself, with fantasies that weren't ashamed, with desires that burned me in silence. I started my sex life with huge expectations. I thought that finally my hunger would get what it was looking for. I thought that in the arms of a man I would find that fulfillment that I had been dreaming of for years. But reality disappointed me. He rushed. He wanted me, yes, but he wanted me selfishly. It was about him, not about us. He looked at me with desire, but not with understanding. And after it was all over, he left me with my eyes wide open, looking at the ceiling and wondering, is that it? I realized then that my hunger was not just physical. It was also emotional. I want to be desired, but I also want to be understood. I want to be taken, but also looked at. I want to be devoured, but also embraced with love. I have become a woman who searches. I search in touches, in words, in looks. I search in sex, but also in emotion. Some have called me a nymphomaniac. Maybe they are right. But if feeling intensely is a disease, then I don't want to heal. Why hunger is real. It doesn't stop after an orgasm. Sometimes, then it just begins. It's not about the number of men. It's not about conquest. It's about fusion. About that touch that says, I see you, I feel you, I want you. Just as you are. I hid my body for years. I tied it up in tight bras, in loose blouses, in silent steps. But my fantasies have never been silent. I carried them in my bag, in books, on walks apparently banal, in showers, in smiles. I imagined unknown hands lifting my dress. I imagined mouths slowly descending my spine. I imagined moans in forbidden places. And the longer I remained silent, the more vivid they were. My body is a map of desire, a map that many wanted to conquer, but few knew how to read it. Some got lost in me. Others used me. Few stayed. And even fewer understood. But I understood one thing. This hunger is not shame. It is life. It is the cry of my blood. It is the beating of my heart when a foreign hand touches my ankle. It is my rapid breathing when someone whispers something forbidden to me. It is that heat that starts from my belly and rises to my throat. Why hunger is not vulgar. It is poetic. It is true. And I don't want it anymore. I hide. Because I am a woman. And the woman in me is no longer silent. She wants to be touched, loved, desired. She wants to be seen not as a problem, but as a promise. This is my first confession. About the hunger that raised me. About the desire that shaped me. About my body, which no longer hides. Chapter 2. My husband, the quiet one. My husband is a good man. He is the kind of man who brings you hot tea when you have a fever and never forgets birthdays. Man who my parents would describe as the right one. And whom my friends secretly envy for the care with which he opens my door or ties my shoelaces when I forget them untied. He is a calm, predictable, correct man. He bears his wounds with dignity and patiently passes the days. He does not raise his voice, does not slam doors, does not lie. He is faithful, present, gentle. But despite all this, he never touched me the way I wanted. When I met him, I was attracted by the certainty in his voice, the way he seemed to be undisturbed by anything. Like calm water that urges you to throw yourself without fear. And I did. I threw myself into him, with everything I am, with all my desire to be seen, to be loved. I thought that in his arms I would finally find rest, balance, a calm love that would soothe me and satisfy my hunger. First, he was tender. He would kiss my forehead in the morning and tell me how beautiful I was. He would caress my hand in public and bring me flowers without any occasion. He would make love to me attentively, with care, with respect. But after a while, our love moved between cold pillows. His movements became repeated, mechanical. The touches turned into routines. He would offer me affection, but he no longer burned for me. He would smile at me, but he wouldn't devour me with his gaze. He would say, I love you, but he wouldn't make me tremble under his fingers. And then I asked myself, what do you do when you love a man who doesn't know how to touch you? When you want him, but you don't feel that he wants you with the same hunger. When they offer you peace, but you miss the storm. My husband is a good man. Too good sometimes, so good that I was ashamed to tell him how much I miss being taken with passion, not with care. How much it hurts me to see him undress me in silence, without tasting me first with his eyes. How empty the nights when we touch each other without really touching each other have become. I tried to tell him, gently. I talked to him about my desires. About fantasies. About how sometimes I would like him to grab me by the waist in the kitchen and kiss me as if he had been waiting for me a lifetime. He smiled. He told me that I am beautiful when I dream. And he continued washing the dishes. He makes love like a ritual. He undresses in silence, touches my breasts with his fingertips, then penetrates me carefully, without rushing, without ever losing his control. He closes his eyes and moans discreetly, so as not to disturb the neighbors. After that, he hugs me, kisses my forehead and falls asleep. But I stay awake, with my eyes on the ceiling, with my body quivering with unfulfillment. I miss that wildness in which a man no longer knows where his desire ends and where I begin. I miss that madness in which flesh is language, and pleasure, the answer. My husband never looked at me with hunger. He never tore my dress. He never pushed my back against the wall, trembling with impatience. He never kissed me as if he was afraid he would never be able to do it again. And I started to lose myself. I started to put on red lipstick, Although he prefers natural lips, I started to wear lace under my day clothes, even though no one would notice. See? Just me. Just the fantasy. Just that thought that, somewhere, someone could see me again as a woman, not just as a wife.My husband, the quiet one, doesn't know that there are nights when he touches me alone, in our silent bathroom, with his body still wet after the shower. He doesn't know that when he says, "Good night," to me and turns his back, I stay awake and start dreaming of other hands, other mouths, other voices calling my name with thirst. I loved him, I love him. But love doesn't stop my desire. It demands more than gentleness. It demands burning. And he doesn't burn, he shines warm, like a lamp in a quiet room. But I'm made of fire. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm too intense. Too alive. Too much, as someone once told me. But how can I be otherwise? How can I give up who I am just to make him comfortable? Sometimes, I watch him when he sleeps. He has a peace on his face that makes me envy him. He doesn't seem to be fighting anything. He doesn't seem to feel like he's missing anything. Maybe for him, what we have is enough. A house, 2 pillows, a warm meal and a woman waiting for him. But I have days when I want to run away, to go barefoot through the night, to get lost in the arms of a stranger who doesn't know my name, but guesses my trembling, to be touched without promises, but with all the sincerity of desire. And then I go back to him, to the man who loves me in silence, who covers my shoulders at night if I uncover myself, who tells me, "Be careful of the cold," before I go out. A good, calm man. But no, not a man who makes me shiver. Maybe it's not his fault. Maybe it's not my fault either. Maybe we love differently, he in silence, me in moans, in promises, me in fantasies, with his mind, me with my whole body. Our marriage is a beautiful house with big windows, but without a fire in the fireplace. And I began to feel the cold. I don't know how much longer I can stay in a warm bed where my soul trembles with desire. I don't know how much longer I can listen to "I love you," without feeling that "I want you" was forgotten somewhere along the way. I don't know how much longer I can smile in the morning, when at night I cried in silence. But I know one thing, my husband is a good man. But I am a woman hungry for life, for skin, for truth. And I'm afraid that one day I will burn too much for his silence to keep me by his side. Chapter 3. The first time I cheated. I didn't plan it. I didn't say to myself one morning, "Today I'm going to cheat." It wasn't an act of revenge, nor a cold, premeditated decision. It was a slow, dangerous, sweet slide, as if a part of me, asleep for years, had woken up, stretched its fingers toward the light. It had happened on an ordinary Thursday evening out of town, at a professional conference. A delegation. A formal dinner. Hotel with thick walls and diffused lights. Simple dress, but one that left my shoulders bared. A man who looked at me not just as a colleague, but as a woman. His name was Andre. He worked in another department. I had only seen him a few times before, but that evening he sat next to me at the table. He laughed to my jokes. He touched my hand without rushing to withdraw it. He complimented me without sounding vulgar. He wasn't pushy. He was present. To one point, during dessert, he whispered to me, "You have a beautiful sadness in your eyes." I froze. Not even my husband had ever said something like that to me. No one had ever noticed my sadness. I hid it well, I thought. But he had seen it. And suddenly, I felt empty. But not vulnerable, but alive. After dinner, we each went up to our rooms. I showered, put on my white hotel robe, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked in the mirror. I didn't look like a woman about to commit a betrayal. I looked like a lonely, hungry woman between two worlds. The phone vibrated. A simple message. "I can't sleep. Come for a drink. Wine? Room 518". I stood still for a few seconds. Then I got up. I got dressed without thinking too much, a long but soft nightgown, which I covered with a cardigan. I didn't put on a BR, no perfume either. There was something instinctive about me, like an animal going to water. When he opened the door, the room was dimly lit. Jazz music was playing softly, a glass of white wine already poured. He looked at me without saying anything. I went in. He closed the door slowly. Then he came closer to me and took my face in his hands. He didn't kiss me. He just said, "You don't have to stay. But if you stay, I want to know that you want me." And I heard myself say, "I want you." It was the first time in a very long time that I felt wanted without explanation, without context, without obligations. He touched me with a certainty that didn't ask for permission, but gave me space. He unbuttoned my cardigan, lowered the strap of my nightgown, and ran his lips along my collarbone. My body trembled, but not from fear. From anticipation, I felt the barrier of shame, of learned morality, of ideal fidelity break down. I let myself go, and my body said, yes, while my heart beat confused between desire and guilt. He kissed me hungrily, he bit my neck lightly, he pushed me onto the bed and lifted my legs around his waist. It wasn't gentleness, it was a thirst that was reflected in our eyes. I moaned, I didn't cover my mouth, I didn't stop. I grabbed his shoulders and felt him enter me with a force that took my breath away. The pleasure was so sudden and sincere that I burst into tears. This had never happened to me before. It wasn't just sex, it was confirmation that I was alive, that I was a woman, that I deserved to be touched not only with respect, but also with desire. After that, I remained silent, with my head on his chest. He didn't say anything. Neither did I, but my thoughts enveloped me like a dense vapor. What had I just done? Why didn't I feel hatred for myself? Why was my body light, but my soul as if clinging to the edge of an abyss? The next morning, we greeted each other like strangers, no words, no reproaches, oh, see you later. I went down to breakfast and sat next to my colleagues, smiling. No one noticed anything. But something inside me had broken. And something else had been born. On the way back, I received a message from my husband. I miss you. I can't wait for you to come home. I hung up the phone and looked out the window. It was sunny, warm, gentle sun, but I felt different. Like a woman who had just stepped into a new world, full of shadows and light. When I returned home, he kissed me on the cheek. He asked me how the conference was. I answered with a perfect lie. Tired. He smiled and brought me my favorite tea. That night, we made love. With him, he was gentle, caring, familiar. But I was somewhere else. I remembered Andre's bites, his rapid breathing, my uncontrollable moans. My husband didn't notice that I was no longer whole with him. Only one part. The other remained in that hotel room, crushed between guilt and desire. The first time when I cheated, it wasn't an act of hate. It was a search-The, an exploration, a release from a woman who was tired of waiting to be wanted. I stepped across an invisible line, and although I cried silently in the nights that followed, I didn't regret it. Because that night, for the first time in a long time, I recognized myself. And I felt whole, even though my world had begun to silently crumble. Chapter 4. Second Skin. After that night, nothing was the same. Not because my world had suddenly changed, but because I was no longer the same in the mirror. I no longer looked at that face with the same eyes. I no longer placed my hand on my hips with the same embarrassment. Something had awakened in me. Not love, not hate, but a raw, lucid and almost liberating form of awareness of my own feminine presence. I returned home with my body touched by someone else and my soul shaken by a reality that was hard to say. I was no longer a faithful woman, but I was honest with my body for the first time. The next morning, I stayed in front of the bathroom mirror longer, naked. The warm water still slid over my skin, but I no longer felt it the same. I looked at my shapes with a new intensity. It was no longer about criticism. I no longer looked for imperfections, extra pounds, discreet stretch marks or the fine wrinkles under my eyes. I studied myself differently. Like a stage on which something sacred had happened. An intimate spectacle that only I knew in all its details. My chest, once hidden under thick bras and loose blouses, now seemed to me an open gate, full of the memory of lips and palms that did not belong to my my neck, before just a support for necklaces or scarves, still seemed to retain traces of a hurried breath. My thighs, those parts of my body that I sometimes clenched in shame when I walked on the beach, now had a silent powered security story. My body had become language, second skin. Not just flesh, but a new garment made of sensations and memory. For the first time, I understood how much I had hidden behind clothes, calculated gestures, shyness. I had spent my life hiding what I was, a woman hungry for touch, for recognition, of silent admiration. I had learned, from shame and education, to keep my back straight, my voice low, my thoughts pure. But fantasies do not wash away with holy water, nor do they disappear with age. The second skin was not visible, and no dress could cover her. No man could penetrate her without my permission. It was armor, but also a transparent veil. It was the way I moved through the world, aware that I carried a secret with me, a guilt, a pleasure. In those days that followed, I began to dress differently. Without ostentation. I had not suddenly become a woman who wanted to be looked at by everyone. No, I just started choosing my words more precisely, my clothes with more intention, my lipstick color with more courage. I wasn't changing for men, I was changing for myself. It was a painful paradox. While my mind kept repeating that I had betrayed my vows, my body felt closer to the truth than ever. I touched my hips in the mirror with a gentleness that amazed me. I admired my long neck, the line of my shoulders, the discreet curve of my waist, with a tenderness that I hadn't had even in my adolescence. Not because I had become more beautiful, but because I had become more mine. I didn't say anything to my husband. Didn't look at him differently. I didn't become cold, on the contrary. I tried, in my guilty way, to caress him more often, to smile at him in the mornings, to pour him his favorite tea without him waiting. Maybe it was a form of compensation, or maybe an attempt to remember who I was before. But something could no longer be reversed. A part of me had been touched that had demanded to be recognized for years. It could no longer return to the cage of decency. Tonight, in the marital bed, I would turn to face the wall and close my eyes, revisiting memories. Not necessarily the act itself, but the way I felt. That moment when I allowed myself to say, "I want you," without shame. The touch without questions. The look that didn't judge me. It was, for me, a form of prayer to a forgotten goddess, the goddess of my body. I was not going to become an easy woman. I felt neither the need to repeat the experience immediately, nor some chaotic desire. It wasn't about numbers or trophies. It was about a new awareness, aware. My body with pride, not with fear. To understand that I don't have to wait for anyone's permission to feel whole. The second skin taught me to listen to my thrills, to stop punishing myself for my desires, to stop confusing love with duty. My husband noticed something. He asked me one evening if I was happier. I told him I was trying. He smiled. Then he kissed me on the cheek. With that gentleness that seemed increasingly foreign to me. With the lack of flame that I was trying to compensate for, I had begun to understand that fidelity is not only about the body, but also about sincerity. And I had already been unfaithful to my soul for too many years. I had lived in the role of a good, obedient, devoted woman, but inside me lived another woman, one hungry for truth, touching, profound. This new identity was not easy to wear. It was not comfortable. It was like a second skin that sometimes squeezed me and other times freed me. But it was real. I started writing in an old notebook, with thick pages and cherry leather covers. Evening after evening, I wrote. Not the story itself, but the emotions. The words that could not be said out loud. The fantasies. The doubts. The fragility. The power and why body had become a word, a confession. Sometimes I felt it like a burden. Sometimes like a key. But I never felt it like a prison. This was, for me, the real betrayal. Not the moment I was with another man, but the years I betrayed myself, in which I was silent, I accepted, I swallowed desire like a shame. The second skin did not offer me a new role. It gave me the freedom to no longer play any. And maybe, one day, I will have the courage to show myself to the world with this exposed skin, to say, this is me. The woman who wanted more. The woman who no longer wants to hide. Chapter 5. The Hotel with Silent Walls. It was an evening like an unspoken promise. I had made no plans. I had not even intended to go there. I had met him by chance. In a crowded cafe in a neighborhood I don't usually go to. He was wearing a dark gray shirt and had those quiet eyes. He didn't ask me anything. He just stood there. He looked at me. Not with desire, not with impatience. With a calm, almost strange attention that brought a shiver to my chest. We got up almost at the same time. It was raining outside, but neither of us took out an umbrella. There was a heavy silence between us, but not oppressive. It was like low music, which you felt in your chest without hearing it. The hotel was secluded, with thick curtains and the receptionist without questions. Neither he nor I said a word. He took the key. The floor 3. Room 314. I seem to remember every detail. Because in that hour, time was compressed. It was silent. It breathed with us. The room was simple, but warm. Dark wood. Diffuse yellow light. The air smelled of jasmine and wet wood. I went in first. He closed the door. I didn't turn my head. I felt him behind me, present without haste, without declared intention. And yet, present in me, in my mind, in my skin. He didn't come closer right away. And I remained still. I felt his breath in my throat, my heartbeat in my wrists. Then, after a time that seemed like an eternity, I felt his palms. Not on my skin, on my blouse point, one on my shoulder, the other on my back. His touch was slow but sure, as if he knew every corner of my body before he touched it. He didn't kiss me, he didn't whisper anything to me, he just pulled my blouse over my head with a painful delicacy. Then, he placed his hand on my bare, Slightly arched back, my chest heaved. I didn't say a word. Silence was our pact, and I loved her. She offered me a sacred space, where I didn't have to explain anything, justify anything, play anything. My skin was exposed, but not vulnerable. Tea was desired, but not devoured. I turned to him, and his eyes pierced me, not with animal desire, but with a strange gentleness. He looked at me as if I were something rare, like something known only in a dream. He began to touch me with his fingertips. Arms, collarbone, shoulders, no rush, no pressure, as if he was reading old stories in my skin. Then he gently pulled my bra strap, revealing my left shoulder. He left his lips there, a touch, not a kiss, a sign, an acknowledgement. When he undressed me completely, I felt no shame and no guilt. I felt beautiful in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not decorative, but whole. Not looked at, but felt. He didn't rush anything. My body became a map, and he traveled on it with the patience of a man who wasn't looking for a destination, but for a path. He sat me down on the bed. He gently pulled him out from under me, so that I could feel my skin on the sheet. His hands moved down to my thighs, to my knees, then back down to my stomach. It was all like a silent prayer, a ritual. His touches were answers to questions I hadn't asked, and my body, hungry but restrained, had learned to trust again. I closed my eyes, but I could feel everything. His palms on my hips, his warm breath on my sternum, his fingers drawing small circles around my navel. I moved without wanting to. Not out of pure sexual desire, but out of a need to anchor myself in that moment, so prolong it. When he entered me, it wasn't with force. It was with a quietness that stirred me, as if our bodies had been made to soothe, not consume. He took my right hand in his, and our fingers clasped without trembling. I drew in air, deep. Not to moan, but to live. Every movement was calculated, but not mechanical. It was a silent conversation, a poetry without rhyme, a flow. Skin on skin, no masks, no mask for him, no mask for me. I was afraid to open my eyes. I was afraid it might end. But at the same time, I wanted to look at him to know who the man was who was reading me without asking me for anything. When I reached that breaking point, there was no explosion. There was a deep tremor, a surrender, as if a part of me, rigid, restrained, trained to be silent, melted. And in that silence a new woman was born. After that, he didn't speak. He just pulled a blanket over me and lay next to me, with his eyes open, with one hand on my chest, exactly where the echo of the beatings could still be heard. I don't know how long I stayed like that, a minute.A, an hour, a lifetime. When I got up, he didn't ask me if I wanted to stay. I didn't ask him either. What was his name? There was no need. I knew him. I knew his palms. I knew his silence. I knew his rhythm. I got dressed in silence. I walked past the mirror and saw my body. Another. Not just wanted. Not just used. Lived in. I left that hotel as if I were leaving a pagan church. With respect. With soft knees. With a burning soul. I never went back. Neither there nor to him. But I still sometimes feel the scent of jasmine in my nostrils. I still feel the sheets on my skin. I still feel his hand on my chest, where he learned to keep quiet about what I never knew how to say. Chapter 6. Mornings with tea and shame. Not the night itself. Not the touch of another man. Not the unknown sheets. Not the silent walls of discreet hotels. Not the hurried breathing. Not the liberating orgasm that made me, for a moment, feel alive. No, not even the quiet departure, with soft steps, with my coat pulled over my shoulders and my makeup partially wiped off. It wasn't those moments that disturbed me the most, but the mornings. When I would return home and find the kettle of hot water on the stove, a bag of linden tea prepared on the white saucer with gold edges. Always the same tea. Always the same gentleness, no questions, no suspicions. My husband was not a jealous man. He was, perhaps, too trusting, or maybe just blind in that protective way that, instead of seeing, prefers to believe.Or ignore. He was still sleeping in his grey, striped pajamas, lying on his back, one hand on his chest, calm. When I entered the bedroom, my body felt tense, dirty, even though I had already washed in the hotel bathroom. My skin held the memory of another man, and the smell of tea and conjugal sleep suffocated me. It tightened me like an invisible straitjacket. A gentle ritual became a silent punishment. I would sit on the edge of the bed, most of the time without waking him. I would press my palms against my knees and stay there, frozen, trying to find my place, to gather myself from all the places I had scattered. But it wasn't easy. Our bed was tidy. My pillow kept the shape of my head. The sheet was smooth, Everything was linear, calm, predictable. And in that order the chaos within me appeared. The other men, the other rooms, the hungry or delicate touches, the bodies I had slipped into to forget or remember who I was. They all appeared there, in the marital room, like shadows that stretched over the furniture and over the shoulders of my sleeping husband. What was hardest to bear was not the shame for what I had done, but the shame that, despite everything, I loved him with a kind of old tenderness, like a yellowed book that you keep on your bedside table even though you no longer read it. I knew his gestures, his silences, the smell of his skin. I knew his smile when he brought me tea and left a note on the refrigerator. Don't forget to wear your red scarf today. It looks good on you. It was tender, he was good, he was there. But his body didn't know how to read me. It wasn't about sex, not just about penetration or positions. It was about language. About the vibration of a hand that knows where to press, about a look that undresses your thoughts, not just your blouse. And he didn't have that language. Not because he didn't want me, but because he didn't have the courage to see me whole, to see my fantasies, to understand my hunger. And then I would look elsewhere. And after every night of escape, morning would come, with tea and shame, with the silence of that house that offered me safety, but not liberation, with breakfast in silence and the kiss on the forehead, with the unspoken question, where were you last night? That he didn't put on and that I didn't hear, but that floated in the air like an invisible trail. I often wondered, if he knew, what would he do? And I wondered with an almost childish fear. Not because I was afraid of loss, but because I was afraid that I would destroy his image of me. He loved me as I had built myself in front of him. Faithful, calm, gentle. The balanced woman. The settled woman. But I had wild parts that I fed in the dark. Fantasies, desires, goals that neither he nor our marriage had ever reached. After an affair, shame was not a punishment from God, but a physiological reaction. I could feel my skin burning, my throat drying. My hands shaking on the teacup. I looked at him across the table and didn't know whether to hug him or run away. I didn't know whether to tell him, I love you, or, forgive me. And I didn't say anything. Sometimes, I made love to him after a night like this, to convince myself that I could show lie to myself that there was passion in that bed too, to wash away my mistake in his silence. But my body didn't vibrate the same way. It responded, it obeyed. But it didn't flinch, it didn't demand, it didn't shout. It was just silent. Other times, I took refuge in the bathroom. I washed my hair twice, with aggressive gestures. I exfoliated my skin. I checked every sign, every trace. And then I sat on the toilet lid and asked myself, who am I? The woman from the hotel? Or the wife who makes pancakes on Sunday? The answer was always the same, both of them. And that was exactly the hardest part to bear. I wasn't a hypocrite. I wasn't just unfaithful. I was torn in two, and on those mornings, both versions of me would sit at the table, one with her shirt slightly wrinkled, the other with a cotton robe, one with someone else's perfume on her neck, the other with her hair loosely tied. They would look at each other in silence. And neither of them had the courage to speak. And yet, there were also mornings when shame, mixed with longing, with the memory of someone else's body, with that vibration that didn't go away even after 2 showers and a coffee, with the need to feel that look again that made me forget that I was married, a woman, a mother, or any other role. Those mornings were the most dangerous, because I didn't just want to forget, I wanted to come back. The shame as it came also went. It settled like a blanket heavy on my soul, but over time I had learned to put it aside. I hid it under smile, under shopping lists, under vacation plans, until the next night. Until the next hotel. Until the next man who would whisper to me without words, I see you. And the cycle repeated itself. Shame. Silence. Fake smile. Desire. Lie. Silence again. Sometimes, on mornings like these, I wished I was discovered so that it would end, so that everything would collapse and I wouldn't have to choose anymore. But he didn't ask. Never. Maybe he knew. Maybe he sensed. Maybe he was just too in love with the image he had built of me, so I would drink the tea, I would kiss his forehead, and I would continue as if nothing had happened. Chapter 7. Love between moans. Love, I was always told, is quiet. It is gentle. It is expressed in small gestures, in the plate of soup brought when you are sick, in the hand placed on your back at night, in the shopping done without you asking. It is that stay said with looks, not with words. That is how I was raised. That is how I was whispered. That is how I loved in the beginning. But what happens when love is not quiet, but fire? When it is not warm soup, but burning? When it does not sit in silent waiting, but explodes in moans, sweat and fingers stuck in the sheets? What name does love have when it is heard? When it screams? When it makes you forget who you are? For the first time I felt something different in the arms of a man I didn't love, but my body recognized him. I didn't know anything about him. He just looked at me as if I were his deepest desire. He hadn't asked me what I liked. He hadn't asked my permission to dream about me. And yet, that night, I felt like every touch of his knew me better than anyone else had. In that brief moment, between a sigh and a light bite on the shoulder, I wondered for the first time if what I was feeling was just pleasure, or the beginning of a strange, unspoken love. Maybe that love that doesn't lie in promises, but in instinct. Not in fidelity, but in fusion. Not in lasting constructions, but in suspended moments. I still don't have an answer. But since then, every time my body has merged with another, not just for sex, but for something deeper, I've asked, is it possible that love can also come in moans? Maybe the answer lies not in reason, but in fantasies. Why fantasies were never good. They were not flowers and scented candles. They were cold walls, hard hands, men who did not ask, but took. Who knew? Who felt? And in every forbidden scenario that crossed my mind on lonely nights, love was not a word, but a state of continuous thrill. Of recognizing a part of me that I had denied for years. I sometimes imagined a man who, while pulling me towards him, whispered to me, "You are not just a body. You are a calling." And in that phrase, real or not, between dream and sweat, I felt love. Not as a promise, but as a visceral affirmation. I want you because I feel you. Maybe not all people can understand this. Some will say that love it means loyalty. That desire is instinct, but love is a choice. And maybe they are right. But I have also experienced loves that were not born in warm silences, but in uncontrolled moans, in looks that broke my defenses, in moments when, although naked, we were more sincere than ever. There is a moment, an almost mythical moment, during a passionate act, when you no longer know who you are. When you are no longer a mother, wife, daughter, friend. You are nothing but a pulsating being. And when, in the midst of that loss of self, you feel that the other is there with you, at the same level of truth, then it is no longer just sex, it is a form of love. Raw, sincere, inevitable. I had a lover who hardly spoke to me at all. In bed, silence was all I had. But when he touched me, I knew. Without words, he adored me, he revered me, he wanted me like a miracle, not as a diversion. And on those nights, even though there were no declarations, no promises, I felt loved. Because it made me forget all the other voices in my head. It made me be. What I can't say is if he felt the same way. Maybe I was just projecting. Maybe it was just the confusion of desire that became, in my mind, the echo of love. Maybe I was confusing burning with devotion, closed eyes with real emotion. But if love is, as many say, about feeling seen, then yes, I was loved in moans. Maybe more sincerely than in marital silences. And then I ask myself, is it wrong to look for love in sex? Not sex as an objective, but sex as a language, a window to a me that I can't express otherwise, and a society that taught me that love is carried, not screamed, that touch is a reward, not a need. My body became its own prayer. And every moan was a word from an alphabet that only some understand. I was judged. Maybe even by myself. I was accused of mixing love with lust. That I sold my soul for orgasms. But the truth is that, deep in every fantasy I lived, I sought love. Not in its social form, but in its instinctive primal form, and a touch that says, "You are here. You are real. You are whole." When he touched my collarbone with violent tenderness, when he stroked my back in silence after the final explosion, when his breath became part of mine, there I felt something that words have never been able to express. And then, maybe it wasn't just desire. Maybe it was love between moans. That love that doesn't ask for a ring, but presence. That doesn't need promises, but truth. That doesn't ask for you whole, but knows you in pieces. Pieces of flesh, soul, past and dream. And if you ask me today, on the sidelines of this confession, did you love during sex? I would answer you without hesitation. Yes. Maybe not in the conventional sense. Maybe not forever. But in that moment, yes, with all my skin, with all the shadows, with all the fantasies that I didn't have the courage to say even in a whisper. It was love. Even if it didn't last. Even if it was forbidden. Even if I never had the courage to admit it out loud. Hard so far. Chapter 8. The Neighbor. There was something about the way he appeared on the doorstep of his house, his hair slightly tousled, his shirt carelessly buttoned. His eyes that didn't seem to look at you directly, but they didn't let you leave either. I had been observing him for a long time, at first, with innocence, then with a curiosity that I tried to suppress, and finally with a dull hunger that I couldn't even hide from myself. He lived 2 houses away, a lonely, silent man with an old dog and a low voice. I didn't know what he was doing, where he came from, or if he was as consumed by his own desires as I was. But something in his presence seemed to answer a silent cry from within me, as if our bodies recognized each other from a distance. The flirting began subtly, prolonged greeting, a look that lingered a split second longer than was socially acceptable. The smile, his vague but piercing, made me feel like everything I thought I was hiding had already been guessed. Maybe not by him. Maybe just by the shadows gathering. Between us.T was a warm summer afternoon when he approached my fence, asking for a key to the mailbox that wouldn't open. His hands were stained with oil, and the smell of warm metal and sweaty skin hit me like an old memory, forgotten in the corners of my body. I gave him the key. He looked at me and said softly, "Thank you, neighbor." That was it. But in that neighbor, there was an intention I could no longer ignore. From that moment on, every interaction with him became a silent promise. I felt exposed. Every move I made, when I took out the trash, when I watered the flowers, when I pinned my hair in front of my face window, it became part of a dance on a knife's edge. Passion with a stranger is a kind of escape. With a man close to home, it's an act of defiance. It was like playing with a flame on the edge of a dry curtain. I knew it would burn. I knew it would all feel too real. Too close. And maybe that's why I gave in. One evening, when my husband was away on a fishing weekend with his brother, and the kids were sleeping at their parents', I saw him standing on his porch, beer in hand, staring into space. I went to him as if I had gone to ask for salt or some banal advice. But there was a silent explosion inside me, an anticipation pulsing between my thighs. "Am I bothering you?" I asked. "No, actually. I was waiting for you." I don't even remember how I got to his house. I think I simply stepped from a territory of reality into one of fantasy. Everything there was silent, warm, intense. The dim light. The worn sofa. The slightly bitter perfume of a man who wasn't trying to impress, but just to be. He touched me first with his eyes. Then with his hand on the back of my head, as no one had done in a long time, as if he had read me, not conquered me, as if he had told me, "I know what you want, even if you haven't said anything." There was no rush, no words. Just that type of touch that doesn't ask for permission, because it knows it was expected. In the darkness of the room, our bodies searched for each other with a restrained desperation. They were slow, deep movements without urgency, but loaded with everything that hadn't been said. When he pulled me, he leaned towards me and kissed me with his mouth half open. I felt myself breaking. Not because he was violent, but because he was real. In our moans I felt fear. And that turned me on even more. The fear of being discovered. The fear of losing myself. The fear of falling in love with a man who lived 2 steps away from me, but who could become everything I wasn't ready to handle. When I was lying next to him with my cheek on his chest and my heart still beating in my ears, he didn't ask me anything. Not why, not what does this mean, not come back tomorrow. He just breathed. And he held me. That silence was almost more erotic than the act itself. It was acceptance. It was understanding. It was, in a way, more dangerous than any words. To live a passion with someone you will see again the next day, at the supermarket, at the street corner, in the rearview mirror when you leave the garage, is an act of emotional suicide. You can't hide. You can't run. You can't blame the alcohol or the stranger. You are you in your own life, with your desires on your face. After that night, I was never the same. Every goodbye with him was a wound and a bandaged, a hastily thrown smile, a moment when I blushed for no reason, a seemingly banal gesture, the raising of my hand when he drove by, which, for me, was a rewriting of sin. I dreamed that night dozens of times. I replayed his touches in my mind. I reconstructed his breathing. I remembered the moans whispered like a prayer. And I asked myself many times if I wanted him because he was close or because, in a strange way, he was the only one who had made me feel that I was seen without masks. In the pleasure of that night I found fear. but also a form of truth, a painful truth, that sometimes desire does not take into account morality, but only hunger. That physical closeness can tell you more about yourself than a lifelong relationship. That you can feel more in one night with your neighbor than in a whole year with your husband. And maybe that's what scares me the most. Chapter 9. The husband begins to feel. It's the small changes that betray. Not disappearances, not obvious lies, not traces left on a shirt collar. No, betrayal is felt first in the pauses between words, in the looks that no longer seek each other, in the gestures that become mechanical. My husband was not a jealous man. Nor was he impulsive. He was the kind of man who carefully places his silence every day, like a blanket between us. But in recent weeks, that silence began to take on a different weight, a silence that was no longer calm, but full of questions. One morning, he looked at me more than usual. I was drinking my tea, my hair tied in a loose bun, trying to look the same as always. But I felt it in the way he asked me, "Did you sleep well?" His voice was warm, but his eyes were troubled. It wasn't a question about sleep. It was the beginning of an inquiry, a sign that our rhythm had been derailed, and he could feel that subtle imbalance, without being able to name it. I smiled at him. Yes, I smiled at him exactly as I had for years. But my smile was no longer sincere, and perhaps it hadn't been for a long time. Not because I didn't love him. A part of me still loved him. A calm, quiet, familiar part. But not the one that pulsed in my veins when someone else touched me. That evening, he waited for me in the kitchen. There was nothing abnormal about it. But the way he sat, the way he held his hands, the way he looked at me, were all new. The question came simply, without accusation, but with a weight that took my breath away. "Are you okay?" Then I realized that he knew. Not everything. Not the facts. But something, a part of me, had become foreign to her. A distance had formed between us, and he had begun to feel it like a permanent shadow. Like a cold that creeps into the bones without you seeing it. I sat down next to him. I passed my hand over his warm, safe hand. My man. I wanted to tell him something, anything, but the words stopped in my throat, blocked by shame, guilt, fear of losing him completely. "You've been avoiding me lately," he said softly. Not as an accusation, but as a sad realization. "No, I'm not avoiding you," I said quickly. "It's just, I feel tired. Tired." What a convenient lie. The fetish word of all women who are hiding something. He nodded, trying to accept. But I knew he didn't believe me. "You've changed," he continued. "I in the way you look at me. I in the way you're silent next to me." I felt like crying. Not because he caught me, but because he was suffering. I saw in his eyes not anger, not jealousy, but a deep pain, as if he had lost something he didn't know how to recover. He hadn't asked me directly if there was someone else. He didn't need it. He didn't want confirmation. He wanted maybe a denial. He wanted to hear my voice say no, even though my whole body was saying yes. In the following days, he became more attentive. Quieter. He would bring me tea to bed, leave me notes saying, "I love you," try to touch me, to bring me closer to him again. But in every gesture there was a silent desperation, as if he were trying to repair an already cracked boat, knowing that water was seeping through the planks. I felt caught between two worlds. One built with patiently, with loyalty, with years of living together. And another, passionate, risky, visceral. My husband was the man who knew my days. The other man knew my nights. And between them, I was falling apart. One evening, when I came back later than usual from a dinner with friends, he waited for me again in the dark and silence. "I miss you," he told me. So much, oh simple and painful. I felt a lump in my throat, a kind of shame that I could no longer hide. He took me in his arms, but not like a man hugging his beloved, but like a shipwrecked man clinging to the last lifebuoy. "If there's something, tell me," he murmured. I didn't tell her. I didn't have the courage. How can I tell her that I'm breaking into pieces in someone else's arms? That my body is waking up for another man? That my mouth whispers foreign names at night, when I should be telling her, "I love you"? He started looking for me more often with gestures. He tried to rekindle his desire, to touch me more tenderly, to make love to me. But my body was only half there. I left him, out of guilt, out of obligation, out of the desire to calm him down. But his touches were more painful than the rejections. It was like I was returning to a space where my heart stopped beating. Sometimes, in the silence of our bed, I could feel him awake. His breathing was not calmed. He would turn his head towards me, hoping maybe I would turn around, to whisper something to him, to make him feel that I hadn't lost him. But I remained motionless. paralyzed between guilt and desire. One morning, he looked at me for a long time, with slightly reddened eyes, and said, "What I can't stand anymore is not knowing what you feel. If you don't love me anymore, tell me. But don't let me lose you in silence." It was almost impossible to answer. Because the truth was complex. I loved him, or at least, I loved him in a quiet, protective way. But there was no longer that fire in me for him. There was no longer that desire for touch, for skin, for abandonment. And how cruel is it to tell someone, "I love you, but I don't want you anymore." Something like that tears a person apart. I looked at him and said only this. "I'm trying, but I feel lost in myself." He nodded sadly. He knew it wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. And maybe he didn't want the whole truth either. Maybe he just wanted a chance. In those days, I started to see him with different eyes. Not as the man I betrayed, but as the man who, despite everything, still hoped for me. He still loved me, still fought. And nothing is more painful than hurting someone who loves you sincerely. But my hunger wouldn't subside. And maybe the hardest thing to bear was precisely this conflict, between guilt and desire, between my husband and that woman I was turning into at night. In his eyes, I could see the questions he wasn't asking. And maybe that's what hurt me the most, that he didn't force me to tell him the truth, but just loved me in silence, waiting for a version of me that no longer existed. Chapter 10. Alone in the elevator with a stranger. There are moments that do not take into account time, morality, or the past. Suspended moments, when everything around disappears, and only a breath, a smell, a twitch of skin remains. It was such a moment, on an ordinary day, in an ordinary building, in an elevator. I remember it perfectly. I was wearing a simple navy blue dress, without cleavage, but which followed the line of my body with a calculated discretion. Low heels, my hair tied in a loose ponytail, with no intention of seducing anyone. I was there for a professional meeting. Another building, another floor. Nothing foreshadowed anything. I entered the elevator with calm steps. There was no one. The door was about to close when a firm, determined hand blocked it. A tall man, with a white shirt unbuttoned at the neck, no tie, with a faint smell of wood and smoke. He said nothing. Neither did I. We looked at each other for a split second. Enough. He pressed the button for the 14th floor. I was going to the 12th. The elevator began to go up. Slowly, with that mechanical rumble that amplifies every heartbeat. I felt the warmth of his body next to me, although he kept his distance. It wasn't the physical proximity that enveloped me, but his energy. Calm, but tense. The kind of tension that doesn't ask for permission. On the 4th floor, the elevator suddenly stopped. A technical problem, maybe. I jumped. He looked at me calm, without surprise, as if he knew. He pressed the emergency button, but without haste. There was a strange silence between us, closed between mirrors and metal. I could feel my palms wet. I was breathing hard. I was looking away, but I could feel him looking at me. And that look was a touch. "It seems like it will take a while," he said in a low, soft voice. That's it, a simple phrase. But the tone, the way the sounds touched my skin, made my heart accelerate. And then the moment followed. I didn't know how it started, but my body turned towards him, in response to a silent call. It wasn't a vulgar gesture, nor forced. It was a slight tilt of my head, a raised eyebrow, a tiny smile that slipped across my lips without my will. And he understood it. He took a step. Then another. Now he was next to me. There were only a few centimeters separating us and a few moral boundaries that I had already crossed in my mind. He didn't touch me. Not yet. He reached out and brought his hand to my cheek, without touching me, just following the line of the skin with his fingers, a gesture that made me tremble. It was an imaginary touch, but more intense than any real contact. His gaze dropped to my lips. I didn't pull back. On the contrary, I closed my eyes for a second, giving him the silent permission he didn't ask for. His lips moved closer, but he didn't kiss me. He stayed there, a breath away, waiting. When we finally touched, it wasn't a passionate kiss. It was slow, exploratory, as if he wanted to read on my lips something I had never said out loud. It was a call, a challenge, a promise. My body responded without hesitation. His hands gripped my waist with a restrained force. He pulled me toward him. With a determination that required no explanation, I let myself go. I abandoned myself in that small space, between mirrors and desire, in a suspended time. There was no conversation, and no questions, no names. Just sensations. Fingers on my thighs. Breath on my neck, a shirt quietly unbuttoned, my skirt lifted slowly, carefully. There was no rush in his gestures. There was an almost ritualistic precision, as if he knew exactly how to touch me, without ever speaking to me. There was another me in that elevator. Point one that didn't feel guilty. Point one who belonged to no one, a woman freed from rules, promises, the past. Just a woman who recognized her body in the hands of a stranger. In a corner of the mirror, I saw my reflection. Mouth half open. Cheeks burning. Eyes slightly teary. Not from pain. From liberation. There, in that narrow space, I felt myself recognizing myself again. Not as a wife, not as a lover, not as a mother, but as a woman. Simply a woman. When the elevator moved again, it was like an awakening. We walked away without speaking. I smoothed my skirt, he buttoned his shirt. The silence was as dense as before, but now it had a different charge. Not shame, but complicity. Not regret, but conscience. On the 12th floor, I went out. He looked at me for a moment, and in that look there was still what he didn't say. I don't want to know who you are, but I will keep your feeling inside me. I stepped out of the elevator with even steps, with my back straight, as if nothing had happened. But inside me, every cell vibrated. I went to the scheduled meeting. I smiled. We talked about documents, about procedures, about everything that was normal. But behind that professional smile, the traces of his lips remained. My body still kept the echo of his hands. And the mind. My mind was in an elevator between floors, with a man who didn't know my name, but who saw me more clearly than anyone. That evening, in my bed, next to my husband, I wondered if I would ever be able to live without moments like this. It was just a gesture, a desired, a moment. But for me, it was a reconfirmation. Desire cannot be explained, cannot be justified. T is simply experienced, sometimes with a stranger between the mirrors. Chapter 11. What I didn't say in therapy. Therapy was a bright room with soft armchairs and beige walls. Inside, there was a subtle scent of lavender, and the psychologist, a middle-aged man with thin glasses and a warm voice, always greeted us with an encouraging smile. My husband always entered first, sat in a corner of the couch and rubbed his hands between his knees. I stayed at a distance from him, sometimes too close to the edge, as if I wanted to run away. But I never ran away from there. I just hid. I always feared the questions that were not asked. The ones that would have forced me to admit that I was not only unhappy but also hungry. Not just confused but duplicitous. Not just a drifting wife, but a woman with an inner world that no one wanted, or could, know about. Therapy was a ritual. We talked about communication, about the daily routine with Day, about the fact that we no longer felt connected, and why husband would express his sorrows with thoughtful words, sometimes too gentle, and he would stare into space when he said he felt like he was losing me. I would nod, pretending to be completely there, but a part of me was far away. In an elevator, in a hotel with silent walls, in the arms of men I didn't know, but who knew me better than the man next to me. The psychologist would ask us questions and wait. The silence between us would become a form of answer. But the truth was much more complex than what I could have said in an hour. How could I explain, without destroying everything, that while he held my hand in that armchair, I was reliving the words whispered by someone else in the middle of the night? How can I say that I sometimes feel love for my husband, but a soft, calm love that doesn't burn me, doesn't overwhelm me, doesn't call me, and that my body, in return, goes crazy for the unknown? For the risk of forbidden touch? Every time the therapist directly addressed me, "How do you feel about what he says?" I answered calmly, composedly, sometimes with a programmed tear. I said that I felt guilty for the distance between us, that maybe I don't know how to communicate, that I want to fix it. I wasn't lying completely, but I was hiding the essential. I didn't say that I loved touches that didn't belong to him. That sometimes, in the moments when he tried to be tender with me, I would relive scenes with others, as if my body had more memories than it was allowed. Sometimes, the therapist would ask about our intimacy. Gentle questions. How often? With what sensation? With what desire? There I became a master of evasion. I said we were both tired, that we wanted to, but we couldn't find the time. I would glance at my husband and see him nodding his head, perhaps relieved that he wasn't the only one feeling the emptiness. I didn't tell him that sometimes I found time, it just wasn't for him. What didn't I say in therapy? I didn't say that I like hands that grab me without hesitation. That I love risk. That I carry within me a hunger that is not appeased by stability and domestic warmth. I didn't say that my body vibrates when I know it is desired by a stranger. That I feel something sacred in the total abandonment, in the moans that cannot be controlled, in the thrill of the stolen touch. I didn't say that I have fantasies in which I am caught, exposed, discovered, not to be judged, but to be seen in all my contradiction. Faithful wife in appearance, instinctive mistress in secret. I didn't say that in reality. I don't just want to be understood, I want to be desired to the point of losing myself. Sometimes I wondered if the therapist was guessing something, if he sensed that my silences were not accidental, that my tired gaze actually had the glow of nights when I hadn't slept at home. But he didn't say anything, he didn't force anything. Maybe because therapy wasn't about absolute truth, but about what each person was ready to bring to the surface. My husband. He was becoming more and more silent. It was as if he was hoping to hear a confession from me, but he didn't have the courage to ask for it. Maybe a part of him knew, he felt it. But he hoped that if it wasn't said out loud, then it wasn't real. We were living a lie together. Point 1 that we had polished with good intentions. Point 1 day, during a session, the therapist asked us a question that froze me. What is the biggest secret you keep from each other? I looked at him. It was a second when everything could change. A moment when I could tell the truth. Or at least part of it. I could say, I'm not what I seem, I live a double life. I look for in other men what I can't find here anymore. I could. But I smiled and said, I don't think it's about secrets. More like things we don't even know why. It was an elegant escape, a phrase that closed the discussion and maintained appearances. And no one insisted. But when I left the office, when I got in the car, I felt emptier than ever. Because I had begun to understand that it wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It was about fear. The fear of being honest. The fear of being seen as I am. Because I didn't know if I could still be loved in my complete form, with my needs, with my wanderings, with that part of me that doesn't want to be fixed. And then, instead of speaking, I continued to remain silent. I continued to lie by omission, to play the role of the struggling but confused wife. Part of me hoped that one day I would have the courage to say everything, to open my soul, not just my body, to show who I am, with all that is beautiful, but also with all that is shameful. But not that day. Not in front of him. Not in front of a therapist. Maybe only here, in the pages of this journal, where I write. What I didn't say in therapy is, in fact, who I really am. Chapter 12. The Nameless Euphoria. There are nights that don't fit into any definition. Nights that can't be told without your tongue getting tangled in its own silences. Nights that have no beginning or end, just an endless ripple of skin, breaths and something deeper, something I still don't know how to name. That's why I chose to call it simply the nameless euphoria. It happened in a city where I didn't know anyone, in a hotel room that smelled of fresh wood and expensive linen. The walls were high, silent, perfect witnesses to a story. That didn't require justification. There was no one who knew me there. Not even me. That's why I let myself be. Wasn't handsome in the conventional sense. He was a man with an infectious confidence, with a low voice that didn't ask questions. He didn't even ask my name. He felt it, or maybe he ignored it on purpose, leaving room for everything that could come without the weight of identities. He touched me as if he knew, as if he had read pages of me that I had not shown to anyone. It was not the rush of an unfaithful lover or the thirst of a stranger. It was an understanding without words, a silent language between two bodies that recognized their need. I undressed slowly, not with shame, but out of a kind of reverence. Not for him. For me, as if each layer of clothing removed brought me closer to an inner truth. Once I was naked, I did not feel exposed. I felt authentic. In the big, round mirror, I saw myself differently. Not as an adulterous woman, not as a guilty wife, but as a pure being, hungry for life. I was not looking for excuses. I was not looking for understanding. I was looking for the touch that would cancel time, fear, conventions. He didn't ask me what I liked. He felt it. His fingers passed over my shoulders like a warm current, soothing, but full of intention. His mouth found my wrist and kissed it with a tenderness that burned harder than any deep kiss. And then, we merged. There is no other more appropriate word. It was a union without words, without promises, without rules. The rhythm of our bodies was directed by an inner music, one that flowed through my veins and pulsed in my flesh. He held me tight, but not a prisoner. He freed me with every movement. That night, I allowed myself to moan without censoring myself, to arch my body to exhaustion, to pull him towards me with the desperation of a woman who no longer wants to hide. He looked at me, like that, in full abandon. And in his eyes I didn't see lust, I saw recognition, as if he knew exactly what was burning inside me, and he responded with the same intensity. There were hours when time liquefied, that I got lost between the sheets, in the depths of sobs that no longer came only from my body, but from an older, deeper area. Maybe from my childhood when I hid under loose clothes, but in which my thoughts never stopped vibrating. Maybe from my adolescence when I learned to smile beautifully, but not to say what I really wanted. I finally felt whole. After the pleasure dissipated us for the second time, he pulled me towards him. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. We were just there, two naked, warm bodies, pulsating in the same rhythm. With my forehead pressed against his chest, I felt a peace that didn't resemble any peace at home. It wasn't comfort, it was freedom. That night, I was no one's mother, I was no one's wife, I was not the woman who was afraid of what others thought. I was simply a living being, full of desire, emotion, impulse. Every touch on my skin said, "You exist," and I answered with all my pores, "Yes, and I'm not ashamed." After a while, he got up and brought 2 glasses of wine to put them on the bedside table, without saying anything. Then he lay down next to me again and pulled me by the hips over him. That's how I stayed, with the wine untouched, with my knees pressed to his chest, with my fingers wandering the contours of his body, like a blind man learning a new map. In that silence, I felt more intimacy than in dozens of conversations in my marriage. There was no need for explanations. Just presence. He let me be. He didn't ask me what was next. He didn't ask me why. I fell asleep in his arms, and I woke up in the morning before him. Soft rays of light filtered through the thick curtains. I watched him sleep. He was beautiful in his silence. I didn't even know his name now. And it didn't matter. I knew his breathing, the taste of his skin, the rhythm of his heartbeats during pleasure. It was enough. I got up slowly, went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were shining, my cheeks were ablaze, my lips slightly swollen. I was a woman touched, desired, consumed and reborn. I didn't feel guilty. Not even for a second. I felt real. I got dressed without haste. I arranged my hair with my fingers and looked at him one last time. He was sleeping peacefully, as if he hadn't done anything forbidden. Maybe he hadn't. Neither had I. Maybe there was no sin in that room. Only truth. I left the hotel with a light heart. The streets smelled of a clean morning, and my steps were not weighed down by any regret. Something inside me was resetting, realigning. Maybe I hadn't found love there, but I had found something rarer, a version of myself that I had forgotten. And even if I didn't have a name for that night, I will always carry it with me. Like a good secret that doesn't hurt, but heals. Like a euphoria without a name, but with deep roots in who I really am. Chapter 13. Mother's Voice. There are voices that never leave us. They remain somewhere deep in our thoughts, on the edge of every choice, in the sigh in the middle of pleasure or in the fear of being seen. And why mother's voice did not speak to me out loud, nor did it shout. But it was planted in me like a silent seed, which grew slowly, coiling around what I had begun to believe I was. Why mother was a beautiful woman, but she did not admit it. She carried her body as if it were a heavy garment, one that she had to hide as best she could. I had never seen her in tight dresses or bright colors. Never with red lips. She combed her hair with tired gestures and always tied her blouse up high, as if her neck were a shameful place. From her eyes I learned what "it doesn't fall off" meant. Not the clear memories, not the direct words, but the silences. Those slight eyebrow raises when my skirt was too short. The heavy sigh when an actress kissed passionately on screen, a door closed too quickly, a blank look, an inherited, unhealed shame, transmitted without being spoken. A good girl doesn't show her body. Love is not what you see in the movies. Better alone than with men who look at you like a piece of meat. I heard them so many times that they became background noise. But perhaps the deepest message was the unspoken one. Love is conditional. It's something you only deserve if you're good, modest, decent, if you don't provoke, if you don't seduce, if you don't listen to your hunger. And yet, even as a child, I felt something else inside me, a burning curiosity, a desire to be looked at, to be touched, to discover what's hidden under the skin. Not for validation, but because in that gesture of discovery there was a joy, a vitality, a life. But shame came quickly. My mother's voice brought it to me. Not directly. It was more subtle than that. It appeared when I placed my palm on my thigh and felt it slide. It appeared when I dreamed of eyes that looked at me differently, not as a good little girl, but as a desired woman. It appeared when I imagined what I didn't I had to imagine. I quickly learned to live in 2 worlds. I and the outside world. I was the girl who got good grades, who kept her knees together, who didn't go out at night and the inside world, I was someone else. Free, bold, with my body stretched out on an imaginary beach, with foreign hands caressing my ankle, with my heart racing beyond limits. My mother never asked her daughter what she felt. She didn't ask me if I had fallen in love, if I cried silently on nights when loneliness pressed down on my chest. She believed that everything born in the flesh was dangerous, that the body could only confuse, ruin, tarnish one's reputation. It wasn't her fault. She had been taught the same way to be by her grandmother, by church, by neighbors who whispered. But without those conversations, without that safe space, I grew broken. Part of me wanted to please, to obey, to conform. Another part screamed inside, demanding freedom, pleasure, touch, intimacy. When I got married, my mother told me, through tears, respect him. She didn't tell me to be happy. She didn't tell me to be wanted. Just to be worthy. And for a while, I was. The calmness with which my husband treated me seemed like the calm I had seen in my parents' marriage, and no fighting, no passion. Just a proper life, well wrapped in shame and fatigue. But then, the questions came. Who am I really? Who do I want to be beyond what I was told to be? Where does this hunger that never goes away come from? Do all women feel it and keep quiet? Did my mother feel it and lock her away forever in a room without a key? One night, after an adventure that had left me trembling with pleasure, I sat in the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I was sweaty, my cheeks were burning, my lips were swollen from forbidden kisses. And yet, what came to mind was my mother's voice. Don't make fun of yourself. I asked myself then, is this mockery? Or is it a rediscovery? Is it a fall or a flight? Mom wouldn't understand. Maybe she'd judge me, or even sadder, she'd be too hurt to say anything. And yet, every moment I feel like a woman, not a housewife, not a mother, not a wife, but a woman. I feel an inherited guilt, one that doesn't belong to me, but that I carry in my bones. Maybe the deepest liberation is not to undress in front of a stranger, but to get rid of her voice inside me, to learn to talk to myself differently, to tell myself that I deserve pleasure, that I can be desired without being ashamed, that love doesn't have to hurt, and that I don't have to choose between being good and being alive. Sometimes, I wonder what it would have been like if my mother had told me, your body is beautiful. Enjoy it. Or, desire is not a sin, is the language of the soul. What kind of woman would I have been? What choices would I have made? But I can't change the past, I can only understand it. Speak it. Write it. So I say it today, out loud, even though I tremble. Mom, I'm sorry you were taught to be ashamed. I'm sorry no one told you how beautiful you are. I'm sorry you thought love was an effort, not a joy. I want to break the circle. Not because I'm better, but because I know. Because I've lived. Because I felt that voice inside me. And I want it, finally, quiet. Chapter 14. Who is judging me? Everyone looks at me. Some do it secretly. Others with contempt, a few with hidden lust, others with amazement, as if trying to understand who I am and why I am like this. But none of them know me. Society, with its dozens of unwritten rules, is the first judge. It tells me to be a good mother, a devoted wife, a discreet woman. Not to wear my skirt too high, not to look too directly, not to laugh too loudly. Not to be too sexual, too free, too present in my body. It wants me soft, but not vulnerable. Warm, but not ardent. It wants me between boundaries that have never been clearly explained to me, but that everyone feels and imposes. Religion. Oh, religion has spoken to me since childhood. Not with a gentle voice, but with a serious, authoritarian one. It told me that the body is a pity, that desire is a temptation, that the woman who knows her pleasure is a fallen Eve. I learned that I must be pure. But no one told me what to do with the hunger inside me, with the fantasies that took me by surprise since adolescence, with the need to be desired, looked at, touched not only with respect, but also with ardor. Then there are the friends. Those who smile and nod when I tell them a diluted version of my reality. Those who, behind their silence, I feel that they are judging me. I don't say it, but I feel it. I feel it in the evasive phrases, in the passive-aggressive advice, in the silent comparisons between our lives. They don't know everything. And maybe if they knew, they would embrace me, or maybe not. Maybe they would subtly exclude me, like women do when they don't know where to put you anymore. when they don't understand how you can be so normal and, in at the same time, so broken. And then there are the men. They don't judge me at first. Not in the way others do. They desire me. They caress me with their eyes, their hands, their words. They approach me as if it were a forbidden, but fascinating territory. Some adore me. Others use me. Many don't understand what I'm looking for. I think I'm just hungry for sex. But it's not just sex, it's never just sex. It's the hunger for life, for meaning, for sincere touch. It's the need to be seen beyond the masks. And yet, after they get what they want, some throw me into the same pot with the clichés. She's crazy, she's spoiled, she's a nymphomaniac, she's lost. Maybe I am, but not because I love with my body, but because love, as I was taught me to lie to myself. But the cruelest judgment doesn't come from outside, it comes of me. There are moments when, after a night with a stranger, in which I was all flesh, pleasure, moaning, I look at myself in the mirror and ask myself, who are you? Not because I regret the pleasure, but because I feel the rupture. Between what I feel and what I know I should be. Between what I want and what the world demands of me. Who is judging me? Myself. The woman who wanted to be a good mother, a housewife, a beloved wife. And the woman who let herself be caressed in the elevator by a stranger without saying a word. I am both the angel and the demon. And the mother who makes tea in the morning, and the mistress who tears her tights in a hotel room. I judge myself because I can't choose. Because I still hope that I can be loved as I am, but I'm afraid that it's impossible. That if I said everything, I would be left alone. And then I play theater, I smile at family dinners, listen politely at therapy sessions, rarely make love to my husband and think about someone else. I'm ashamed, but not because I feel, but because my feeling has been, since childhood, linked to guilt. Pleasure has always been associated with something wrong. With, it's not good, it's not done, don't respect if you give in. And yet, I experienced the most intense moments of presence in the arms of men who didn't ask for anything from me. Just my body. But through my body, they looked at me with a sincerity that I've never felt in real life. I would like to free myself, to stop carrying the judgment of others in my chest, offer myself forgiveness, tell myself, gently, you are human. You are a woman. You have the right to feel. But it's not easy. Because the voice of the world is loud. Because shame is tenacious. Because sometimes I get lost between desire and regret, between courage and guilt, between truth and appearance. Who judges me? Those who don't know what it means to wake up in a bed and feel like you're not whole. Those who have never felt that their body is both a curse and a blessing. Those who have never lived in conflict with their own flesh. Those who are afraid of women like me, not because we are dangerous, but because we are mirrors. But maybe it's time for me to stop being afraid, to stop apologizing for the way I live, to stop closing my eyes when I feel like screaming. Maybe the only way to the truth is to accept that I am a contradiction, faithful and unfaithful, loving and wild, mother and mistress, caring and depraved. I can no longer tear myself apart so that others can feel comfortable. Being whole is more important than pleasing the world. And if I judge myself, then I should do it with my eyes open. Not with hatred, but with lucidity, to look at all my faces and to embrace them, to learn that my life is not wrong just because it doesn't fit into a pattern. Today, for the first time, I ask myself, if I met myself on a bench, in the park, would I smile at myself? I think so. Not because I'm perfect, but because, despite everything, I've stayed alive. Chapter 15. Double life. I'm two women, two sides of the same being. Sometimes I feel like an acrobat on a tightrope, balancing between two worlds that don't touch, but that intertwine inside me. During the day I wear the clothes of the perfect wife, a decent dress, a calm voice, a reassuring smile. I do my shopping with carefully drawn-up lists, prepare dinner, answer questions without hesitation, play my role with an almost natural elegance. I've gotten used to not moving a single muscle in my face when I tell a lie. I've learned the art of silence that doesn't arouse suspicion. It's a discipline, a daily exercise in survival between two truths. But at night I become the other. The one I recognize from dreams, from needs. From that corner of the mirror where guilt is no longer reflected. I dress differently, I move differently, I hear myself laughing with a freedom that does not belong to me in the light of day. I am that hidden world. I have no husband, no obligations, no rules except those of my body. I do not ask myself, If it is right, I only ask myself if I feel it is difficult to explain how much energy this duplication consumes. I wake up in the morning in the marital bed, next to the man who still knows my breathing in his sleep, and I wonder who I am at that moment. The wife? Or the mistress from last night? Sometimes I feel like I'm missing a thread of identity, that only the threads of lies hold my life together. It's not just infidelity, it's a form of emotional schizophrenia, a kind of parasitic life, in which one of me slowly consumes the other. There are moments when I sit at the table with my husband and I feel his warm, gentle, but lost gaze. He tells me about his colleagues, about what went wrong at home, about vacation plans. I nod, listen, smile. But a part of me is somewhere else. Maybe in a hotel room. Maybe in the back seat of a car. Maybe in someone else's palm. Sometimes, I look at him and feel miserable. Other times, I wonder if he's the one who hasn't really looked at me in years. Once, I loved him. Maybe I still love him in a lost form. But my body no longer recognizes him, so I lie. But not in the classic way, not through false phrases. I lie through silence, through omission, through carefully measured evasions. I say I was late for the office, that I met a colleague, that I needed some alone time. And he believes me. Because he has no reason not to. Or maybe he does, but he doesn't want to see them. Maybe he feels, deep down, that I'm somewhere else, but he prefers not to dig. And I cling to this blindness of his like a safety net. There is a form of perverse pleasure in this double life. Not just from the adventures, but from the fact that I can fool the world. That I can be two women and no one can stop me. But this pleasure inevitably turns into fatigue, a heavy fatigue, which gathers in my shoulders, in my chest, in the silences between two lies. I'm afraid. Every day. That I'll be caught. That I'll say the wrong name. That I'll have a mark on my neck that can't be explained. That my phone will ring when it shouldn't. I live with one eye on the clock and one on my conscience. And yet, I stop. Because every adventure, every stolen gesture, every moment of euphoria reminds me that I am alive. Not robotic, not dead in routine, not buried in the expectations of others. But me. The woman who, yes, lives dangerously. But she lives. I have often wondered if this is a form of addiction. Maybe. But if it is not just about sex. It is about sensation, pure emotion, sincerity in a world of conventions. I end those moments of passion. No one asks me to be anything other than what I am. No one wants explanations. No one judges me. But the price? It's big. I'm starting to forget who I am. One day, I forgot my wedding ring in my spare underwear bag. Another day, I said the wrong name in my dreamed. Men's voices mix, their touch, their words. I try to keep my diaries in order, but my life has become an endless puzzle. I build my lies like a well-written story, but I forget what I said and to whom. And the most painful thing is that, in all this madness, I don't feel whole anywhere anymore. When I'm at home, I feel guilty. When I'm in someone else's arms, I feel lost. I don't know where my center is anymore. I don't know which of the two women I really am. Maybe I was both, but now I seem to be becoming neither. Sometimes I think about what it would be like to tell the truth, to look my husband in the eyes and tell him everything, to tell him how much I tried to I was whole, but how hard I ended up breaking. But the truth is not only liberating, it is also destructive. Not just for him, but for me, for us, for everything we built around appearances. So I walk on a tightrope, with my arms outstretched, my heart clenched, my smile well adjusted. Maybe one day I will fall. Maybe my balance will be broken and everything will come out. Or maybe one day I will find the courage to go down alone. Choose one life, not a double one. Say, this is who I am. Take me or leave me. But today I juggle a little more. Another lie. Another kiss. Another escape. Another night in which I lose myself, and find myself again, between two women who live in the same skin. Chapter 16. The First Woman. It was a light touch, like a breeze that doesn't know whether to stay or move on, and no man had ever touched me like that. No palm, no matter how gentle, had ever awakened such a deep and silent shiver in my skin. Maybe because it wasn't just a touch, it was a recognition, an old, unspoken calling that had been lying inside me, forgotten or denied. Her name was Clara. She had a warm smile and eyes that saw beyond the mask. We had met at an art gallery, in the city where I had fled to work for a few days, far from home. I had come for a contract. She for the color, for the wine, for the music. We approached like two curious strangers, a long dialogue between paintings and red wine, between slightly ironic lines and pressed pauses. It was like a slow dance of words. She didn't flirt. She didn't provoke me. But she see. And she touched me with her eyes before touching me with her hand. I never imagined that I would be attracted to a woman. Not because the idea scared me, but because I hadn't allowed it in childhood. In adolescence, in all those moments of fantasy, women were there, but silent. I felt their vague presence, like a trace of perfume, like a breeze over my shoulders, but I didn't give them a face. I locked them in a mental box labeled forbidden, and moved on. But that night with Clara, the box opened by itself. She invited me to her, simple invitation, without insinuations, without promises. I said yes. Not with my voice, but with my steps that followed her through streets softly lit by old light bulbs. When I entered her apartment, I felt like I was in a refuge, and no man had ever decorated his space with so much tenderness. Books in the corners, soft textiles, discreet candles. No ostentation. Just balance and color. We talked about nothingness. Music. Books. Something about childhood. Something about Paris. I laughed. And then, out of the blue, she came closer. She didn't ask me anything. She just raised her hand and caught a strand of hair that had fallen over my cheek. That was enough to break the deadlock in me. I felt a tremor then that wasn't just desire. It was fear. It was shame. It was curiosity. It was a strange longing, like a memory of something I hadn't experienced. Yet, when she kissed me, I closed my eyes. Because I didn't want to control the moment. I just wanted to feel. I don't know if her lips were softer or if my heart was just more ready to receive them. But it was different, a different that broke down boundaries. She touched my collarbone with a care that seemed like prayer. It wasn't that rush that men know, that pressure for more. It was an exploration, as if she wanted to tell me that every inch of it's important to me, that every jolt deserves patience. I let myself be touched, I let myself be seen. And for the first time, I didn't feel exposed but welcomed. I can't tell you in detail what happened that night. Not because I'm ashamed, but because that experience doesn't translate into gestures. It was like slow music between two bodies that weren't rushing anywhere. Clara knew how to listen to the skin. She spoke to me with her fingers, not with orders. She made me laugh while she melted me. And then she made me cry. Yes, I cried. Not from pain. But because in all my double life, in all my adventures with men, I had never felt so clearly that I was whole. She didn't want anything from me. She didn't ask me to give her pleasure, she didn't ask me to perform. She was there for me. And I was there for me. After that, I sat in silence. Between us he smelled of jasmine and wine, he had bare shoulders and a peace in his eyes that I had never seen before. No regrets. No what's next. Just presence. He told me, smiling, that he didn't need explanations. That sometimes life brings us gentler mirrors than we expected. And that maybe tonight, I had looked into one. I left early in the morning. He walked me to the door. He didn't ask for my number. He didn't promise me anything. He just stroked my fingers and said, "You have the right to love yourself in all your forms." On the way to the hotel, I felt a new peace. It wasn't the euphoria of an adventure. It wasn't the panic of guilt. It was as if a part of me that had been silent my whole life had finally told its story. I hadn't told anyone. Not my friends. Not my therapist. Not even my diary for a while. It was a treasure too fragile to expose to the world. But in me, that moment became a landmark, then in a place where I can return when I feel lost in the noise of misunderstood desires. Clara wasn't the beginning of a new life. I didn't become someone else. I didn't run away into a relationship with a woman. I didn't change anything in appearance. But in essence, everything changed. Because I understood that love doesn't have a single outline. That I don't have to choose a label to be honest with myself. That my body is a vast territory, not a single direction. Maybe all my double life, all the escapes, all the lies, were just ways of running away from myself. And that night, for the first time, I ran towards myself. Chapter 17. I love you, but you're not enough. Imaginary letter to her husband, a cruelly honest, vulnerable confession, in which words turn into bridges between two souls that are moving away, but still look at each other. My dear. It took me a long time to gather these words, so many times I was about to write, but I stopped. I was afraid, I was ashamed. I lied to myself that it was better this way, in silence. That if I don't speak the truth, it doesn't hurt. But it hurts me. And it hurts you too, even if you didn't say I to. So now, for the first time, I'm writing to you everything I didn't have the courage to say out loud. I love you. It's the first thing I want you to know, and perhaps the most confusing of all. Because I love you no longer means what it once did. It no longer has the simple warm outline it had when I first said it to you, that late evening, in the kitchen with the smell of coffee and fresh desire. Now, I love you is a space between us, wide, silent, sometimes oppressive. I love you, but you're not enough for me. Not because you weren't there. You were. Always. With your patience, with your hands that never touched me. Too hard, never too little. With the way you looked at me in the morning, as if I were your whole universe. With your small gestures, with your loyalty. You were always sure, constant, like an anchor. But I never felt whole again. It's hard to explain, especially because I know how much it will hurt you. But love doesn't always mean sufficiency. You can love someone and still feel an emptiness inside that can't be filled with good gestures or nice words. That emptiness is mine, not yours. And it wouldn't be fair to ask you to fill it. When I look at you, I see the man I wanted to love for the rest of my life, without a crack. But when I look at myself, I don't see the woman who could live only with what you offer me. Here's my cross. And ours. No, I cheated on you because you didn't love me. I cheated on you because, inside me, there is a hunger that I didn't know how to satisfy, a hunger for touch, for novelty, for discovery, for loss of self, for feelings that flood my skin, take my breath away, mix my shame with euphoria. In a way, my body has always sought more than warmth. It has sought a storm. And it's not your fault that you are not a storm. You are assured that I have returned to every time after the shipwreck. You welcomed me gently, without questions, without looking for traces of sand in my hair. But I felt that sand in all my fibers, my skin, my eyes, my restless sleep betrayed me, and you knew. Even if you didn't say I in your silences there were suspicions, in your eyes, a sadness silent. You wanted to know, but you were afraid. And I was even more afraid. The truth about me is not pretty, it is not linear, it is not at all as you hoped when you said your vows. But the truth is that I looked for in other men what I could not find with you, loss of control. Risk. That indefinite something that burns your cheek when someone touches your neck and says a single word and no names, no promises. Just gestures, touches, flesh. A love that is not related to care or routine, but to instinct. Maybe it seems superficial to you. Maybe you have the impression that all I was looking for was sex. And yes, it was sex. But not only that, it was unchaining. It was freedom, it was running away from myself and the expectations you placed on me. Woman, wife, mother, among all these words, lost something of myself, and then I started searching, desperate. And do you know what I discovered? That every night with someone else brought me back to you, but not whole. Sometimes I would come back full of guilt. Sometimes with anger. Sometimes, without feeling anything, I would make my tea in silence, sit next to you in bed and watch you sleep. I would feel your quiet breathing and wonder, how can someone be so calm when I am a hurricane in my skin? I was unfair. And I know that I hurt your soul, even if you didn't see exactly how. Did I know that you felt the distance, the coldness, the absences? I know that sometimes you looked at me and saw a stranger. And yet, you stayed. You were silent. You hoped. You comforted me. You brought me flowers. And maybe that's why it hurts more. Because I know that I don't deserve so much kindness, and it doesn't save me. I wish I were different. I wish I could be the woman who sits next to you and feels that she has everything she needs. I wish your hands were enough for me. But they're not enough for me. And maybe they were never enough, but not because they weren't good. But because my soul asks for something else. Not more. Just something else. I'm writing all this not to ask for your forgiveness. Not even so that you can forgive me. But because you the truth is due. Because for too long I have lived in silence, in half-truths, in empty promises. I love you. But my love is broken. It is a love that does not find peace every day. It is a love that wants you well, but can no longer lie to you. A love that was loyal to you in the soul, but unfaithful in the body. A love that will always carry you in my heart, even if my steps will go, perhaps, in another direction. I know it is unfair. I know it seems like a betrayal of everything we built together. But it's also an attempt at sincerity, late but sincere. Maybe in another life, I would have loved you. Completely. Maybe if I were built differently, raised differently, whole differently, I would have been all you needed. But now in this life, I'm just a woman who's still learning who she is. And who, finally, has the courage to tell the truth. I love you. But you're not enough for me, and I'm sorry. Yours, for everything that was true between us. Chapter 18. Confession at the Priest. It was an afternoon with pale grey light, as if the sky had lost all desire to be clear. The street seemed quieter than usual, and my footsteps echoed on the asphalt like a heartbeat that can no longer find its rhythm. I didn't know where I was going, I had no plan. Just a heaviness in my chest that wouldn't let me breathe, smoldering restlessness that kept me awake for whole nights. And then I saw the church. I don't even know why I went in. I hadn't been in for a long time. My faith had been a thin thread that had long since broken, between the moral lessons of childhood and the shame that had been embedded in my bones since I was little. But that day I went in. The heavy door closed behind me with a dull crack. The air was cold and the smell familiar, wood, old wax, cold stone and silence. I walked down the aisle without looking at the icons, without making the sign of the cross, without knowing if I still believed. All I knew was that my soul was bleeding, and that I wanted for a moment to put it in someone's hands. I hadn't been to confession since I was a teenager. Then, I was afraid that God would read my sins in my eyes. Now, I was afraid that he wouldn't say anything anymore. I sat down on my knees, trembling slightly. The priest was in the confessional, a silhouette in the shadows. His voice came softly, softly, as if time had stopped. "Daughter, the Lord is here. Tell me what's bothering you." And I began in a low, torn voice. I didn't hide behind beautiful words. I didn't try to justify. I said everything. That I'm married. That I've been loved. That I loved. That I cheated on him. Several times. That sometimes I cried after him, sometimes not. That my body became a hole and a promise. That I lost my meaning in foreign touches, and that, instead of finding my soul, I got more entangled in my own desires. I fell silent then. I was waiting for a release, an excuse, a punishment. Something. Anything. But the priest was silent for a while. "Are you ashamed?" he finally asked. I blinked. The question caught me off guard. "I don't know. Sometimes yes. Sometimes no. I feel guilty. But not always." "Then it's not shame. It's confusion, being divided in two. Did you come here for forgiveness or for meaning?" His question penetrated me. There, on my knees, in that heavy silence, I understood that I didn't just want to be forgiven. I wanted to know why. Why couldn't I stop? Why wasn't love enough for me? Why did I only feel alive in the shadows? I want to understand. Who am I, Father? Who is the woman who looks in the mirror and feels lost, but strong at the same time? A woman who didn't learn to love without consuming herself, he murmured. A woman who confuses desire with salvation, pleasure with validation. You grew up with the idea that the body must be hidden. But in fantasy, your body cried out. It brought tears to my eyes. That's right. When I was little, my mother told me to stand up straight, not to let anyone touch me, not to wear short skirts, because sin is in the eyes of men. I grew up with shame in my ribs. Then, when someone touched me with desire for the first time, I felt alive. And ever since then I've been looking for that sensation. You weren't looking for touch, but for validation that you're desired. But desire passes, daughter. And when it passes, what's left? I was silent. What's left? The emptiness. The guilt. The silence between me and my husband. The closed door inside me. The shame that no longer shows itself in my cheeks, but in my cold dreams. "Do you think God can forgive you?" he asked me, after a long silence. "I don't know. I don't think I deserve it. But I don't know who God is, if he wants me broken, resigned, correct on the outside and dead on the inside." Then, for the first time, I felt that the priest wasn't there to judge me. But neither was he there to comfort me. He was there to hold me in front of the mirror, to ask me, "What are you doing with your life? If you want forgiveness, you must learn to stand in the face of pain, not to run away into pleasure. If you want freedom, you must choose the truth, not the lie. And if you want love, you must be whole, not divided into 10 men and 1,000 nights." "How do I get myself together?" I asked in a whisper. "You start by no longer hiding. Not from your husband. Not from God. Not from you." I left the church more troubled than I had entered. Not because my word was not received, but because, instead of forgiveness, I received a mirror, an image of myself, as I am, torn between the need for love and the desire for freedom. Between morality and the flesh. Between fidelity and hunger. That day I did not feel peace. But I felt the beginning of a question. If I stop lying to myself, who do I become? Chapter 19. Will I lose you? He didn't raise his voice, he didn't break anything, he didn't slam the door. He stood there, in the doorway of the living room, with his bare hands and wet eyes. And he asked me, in a voice that crushed my soul louder than any scream, "Am I going to lose you?" At that moment, all the walls I had built with so much care collapsed. The little lies, the mumbled excuses, the fake smiles, the mechanical caresses in bed. I wanted to tell him no, I wanted to embrace him and lie to him beautifully, like I had done so many times. But this time, I couldn't. My bones seemed to refuse to play the role of a faithful woman anymore. My body, tired of so much double life, wanted to be silent or to say everything. "Why are you asking me this?" I said, but my voice was shaking. "Because I don't know who you are anymore when you look at me. Because you answer me as if you were far away. Because when I touch you, I feel that your body is here, but you are somewhere else. And because I love you. And I don't want to lose you. But something inside you has changed." I was silent. What should I tell him? That he is right. That yes, I have changed. That I carry the marks of other hands on my skin and fantasies with other men in my mind? That sometimes, while he was telling me about his day, I dreamed of my dress unbuttoning in the elevator of an unknown hotel? Tears were silently streaming down his cheeks. He wasn't crying loudly. But in his eyes there was a question that tore me apart. "Why? Did I hurt you?" "I don't know how it happened," I whispered. "But it happened, didn't it? You don't even need to tell me, I feel it." He came and sat next to me on the couch. He didn't look at me with hatred, but with a final tenderness, like a man who watches his love fall apart in his hands and can't do anything about it. "I love you," he told me. 4 years. With everything I was and everything I didn't know how to be. Maybe I didn't understand you. Maybe I was too quiet. Too predictable. Maybe I confused comfort with affection and routine with love. But I was here, always. I was yours. And you? And me. I swallowed hard that I wanted to scream, run, hide in some hotel room with heavy curtains and forget my name. But I was there, in the middle of our house, in the middle of our life built with silences and gestures. I couldn't run anymore. I was lost, I admitted. And I lied to myself that a stranger's touch was more real than our silence. But I didn't stop loving you. Not yet. I didn't love myself anymore. And when you don't love yourself anymore, you end up clinging to anything that makes you feel alive, even for a moment. He blinked often, as if trying to hold back tears. "And what do you choose now?" What do I choose? A question with 1,000 answers and none of them simple. Did I choose stability? Did I choose the calm, warm love of the man who loved me beyond my skin? Or did I choose freedom, desire, fantasy, the constant flight after a fire that never keeps me warm? I closed my eyes. I saw all the moments in my mind. His laughter in the morning, his fingers in my hair when he thought I was asleep, his favorite soup that I cooked without telling him I didn't like it. And then, I saw the nights with strangers, the hotel rooms, the trembling voice in the dark, the guilt afterwards. "I don't want to lose you," I said. "But I have to learn to find myself." What does that mean? It means I have to stop lying. Not to myself. Not to you. Go to therapy alone. Understand what's eating me up. Maybe with you if you still want. But I don't want to run away. I don't want to hide. I hid too much. He sighed deeply and touched my shoulder lightly. His warm, familiar hand made me feel, for the first time in a long time, that I was home. Not in the sense of a house with clean walls and plates, but in the sense of a love that didn't leave, even though I did everything possible to chase it away. "Then I won't lose you today," he said. "But promise me you'll be honest with me. Even if it hurts. Especially then." I nodded. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know if we would survive as husband and wife, or as two people learning to tell each other the truth. But for the first time, I felt like I had chosen something other than pleasure. I had chosen to be here. With all my shadows. With all my mistakes. With all my fears. Will he lose me? I don't know. But that night, I let him see me. Really. Chapter 20. Women Like Me. A seemingly random encounter, but one that had a soothing strangeness to it, as if the universe had held out a mirror to me, a woman. Stranger. But so familiar. Her name was Claudia. We met in a creative writing workshop, on a rainy afternoon. When I had left the house just so I wouldn't be alone with my thoughts, I didn't want to learn anything. I wanted to breathe different air, to sit in a room where no one knew me. Where no one knew what I was carrying in my chest, what scars were blooming under my skin. She sat next to me. Not because the place was empty, but because she chose me. That's what she told me later, laughing. You had a beautiful sadness in your eyes. I recognized myself in her. Claudia had short hair and a low voice, like a jazz note forgotten in a basement. She wasn't the kind of a woman who stands out, but had something magnetic about her, a dangerous silence, a smile that was neither gentle nor hostile, just sincere. I rode in silence next to her for 2 hours, but I felt that a thread had formed between us, invisible and elastic, like a connection between two women who no longer have time for pretense. We stopped for a coffee, without asking each other anything unnecessary. After 2 mouthfuls, Claudia said, "Have you ever felt that you are more alive with a stranger than with the man who knows all your birthdays?" I froze. My entire recent life had been a silent answer to that question. I nodded. "And then the guilt," she continued. "But not towards him. Towards you. Because you know you're running away. And yet you're running away again." I started laughing, a nervous laugh, almost hysterical. Not because it was funny, but because I felt like someone had finally translated my soul into a language I understood. Claudia looked at me directly, without blinking. "You're like me," he said. "And I'm like you. Women like us don't find their place. Because the world wants us to be good or crazy. Not complex. Not hungry for touch, but also for meaning. We want to be loved, but not for a moment, but in every corner of our being. And when we don't get everything, we look elsewhere. Not because we're destructive, but because we're incomplete." I sighed, feeling my fingers tremble. It was as if a hidden wound, festering for years, had been gently touched. "And it didn't hurt," he set me free. "Have you been married?" I asked. "I am. Still. With a good man. Who holds my hand in my sleep, but who has never asked what dreams I have at night. And I lived 2 lives. One as a wife and one as a mistress in the shadows. One with soups, shopping and planned vacations. The other with hotels, nights with fake names and touches that told me, you are alive. And do you feel guilty?" "I feel whole. Sometimes. Sometimes, emptied. But never just one of the two." We both fell silent. I in the small, dimly lit cafe. There was nothing around. It was just her and me, 2 women who acknowledged their pain without judging them. Neither wanted to play the role of saint, nor the role of victim. We were just 2 women who were looking for themselves in foreign bodies, in hurried touches, in silent orgasms, in forbidden fantasies. And now, in that conversation, we had found each other. "Do you think we will ever heal?" I asked. "I don't know if it's an illness. Maybe it's just a deep hunger. For true love. Not the kind that sends us flowers, but the kind that asks us, 'What makes you run away?' But no one asks. No. Just women like us." Claudia took out an old diary and showed me a few pages written with a trembling hand. Fragments of thoughts. Confessions. Today I felt guilty for feeling good. Today I felt like I loved someone whose name I never asked. Today I wasn't a mother, nor a wife, nor a secretary. I was just living flesh. And I loved myself like that. Just for an hour, I felt a lump in my throat. They were my thoughts too. But I had never written them down. I just lived them. I buried them under lipstick, under smiles, under apologies. "Do you want to write?" Claudia asked me. "About what?" "About you. The real you. Right. Because our voice wasn't heard enough. Women like us have always been labeled nymphomaniacs, immoral, lost. But no one wanted to find out what hurts behind desire, what's missing behind orgasm. What silence taught us." I left the cafe with a strange feeling. Not of guilt, nor of complete liberation, but with a new peace. Claudia had shown me that I'm not a monster, that I'm not alone, that there's a name for what I felt, complexity, and courage. The courage to admit that life isn't linear, that love isn't black and white, that desire isn't just sexual, it's existential. That night, I didn't run off to any stranger's bed. I didn't open apps. I didn't write to anyone. I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself, long deep, with brutal honesty. Women like me, they don't ask for forgiveness for who they are. But they don't want to live in the dark anymore. Maybe we're hungry. Maybe we're unstable. Maybe we're wrong. But we love. Intensely. Truly, we just weren't taught how. Maybe. Sometimes all it takes is another woman to tell us, I understand you. And that changes everything. Chapter 21. My body is not a betrayal. 4 years I lived like and as if I had a dirty secret imprinted on my skin, a silent code, a guilt that silently accompanied me wherever I went. Even in the moments when I let myself be touched, loved by some strange man, a part of me was still hiding, not because I didn't want to be there, but because I didn't think I deserved to be. But one day, without knowing why right then, I opened my eyes differently. Not to the world, but to myself. I was home, alone. My husband had left for a few days. I had nothing planned and no man to find, no reason to run away. There was silence. That kind of silence that once gave me shivers of anxiety. Now, something else gripped me. I looked at myself in the mirror. Completely. With all the details. The fine wrinkles in the corner of my eyes. The slightly sagging shoulders. The thighs that were no longer firm like they were in my 20s. The breasts that bore of stories. My body. Not perfect. But alive. For the first time, I asked myself, why have I felt guilty all my life for the way I react to desire? Why have I lived with shame embedded in my flesh, like an invisible shirt? Who put the idea out there that women who feel too much are dangerous? That a woman who loves sex can no longer love with her heart? I remembered my mother's voice, the voice of religion, the voice of whispers in high school, the voice of my first friend who said that a serious girl doesn't do that. I saw myself small again, hiding my body in loose clothes, but silently thinking about hands touching me, lips kissing me in the dark, sensations that I didn't know how to call them, but that made me feel me. The truth is, I never betrayed my man. Not before he betrayed me dozens of times. I betrayed my fantasies, telling them they were dirty. I betrayed my joy of being touched, telling him it was a sin. I betrayed my instinct to seek passion, telling him it was selfish. And yet, my body, with all its stubbornness, did not abandon me. It felt, it wanted, it burned. It was my teacher and revolutionary, but I treated it like an enemy. That day, I did something I would never have believed possible. I sat in front of the mirror, naked, and began to touch myself without guilt. Not with erotic intent, but with gratitude. With gentleness, I touched the skin on my arms, my soft thighs, the belly that had carried a life and was always criticized. I whispered, "Thank you for keeping me alive. Thank you for showing me who I am. Thank you for not letting me pretend." And I started to cry. Those tears weren't from pain, but from release. They were the tears of a woman who finally understands that she's not broken. That desire is not a curse. That her body is not a betrayal, but a temple. And that it was the world's mistake to tell her otherwise. Maybe I hurt my husband. Maybe I made selfish choices. I don't deny that. But that doesn't mean that what I feel is a mistake in itself. Loving touch, being hungry for connection, feeling alive through your skin, are not sins. I'm part of being human. Of femininity. I grew up with a vision of the body as a threat. I was taught that if I show it, I provoked. If I cover it, I'm worthy. If I feel, I'm light. If I keep quiet, I'm worthy. For years I've swung between desire and punishment, between passion and self-loathing. But in a society that shames women's pleasure itself, how can we not all be divided in two? From Clara I learned that I am not alone. From my mirror I learned that I am not sick. And from that moment of silence, of fearless solitude, I understood something essential. Self-love begins with accepting my body, desire and nature as I am. It was not a mystical revelation. No ray of light pierced my ceiling. But it was real. It was profound. It was the beginning of a forgiveness. I looked at my breasts, and I no longer saw objects of desire, but parts of myself. I touched my thighs and I no longer thought, they are too thick, but they are strong. I inhaled, feeling the air fill my chest and no longer carried only guilt, but freedom. And then I said to myself, my body is not a betrayal. It is my story. It is my truth. From that day on, I started writing. Not just confessions, but statements, poems, thoughts. Sometimes I write with anger, sometimes with tenderness, but always with truth. I filled an entire journal with thoughts about what it's like to be a woman and to feel, without censorship, without shame, with all the nuances between love and desire. I don't know if society will ever accept women like me. Maybe not. Maybe they will continue to judge us. But I understood something fundamental. I can't change the eyes of others, but I can change the way I look at myself. and in my mirror, I no longer see a traitor, I see a woman. Whole. Beautiful not only in form, but in courage. Sensual not only in flesh, but in soul. Loving not only in words, but in silent truths. It was hard to get here. But I would never go back. Chapter 22. The Last Lover. I didn't know then that it would be the last time. Maybe I didn't even want to know. Maybe if someone had whispered to me that it would be the last foreign touch I would receive out of desire and not love, I would have run away, or maybe I would have surrendered more easily. But something was different from the first moment. It wasn't night. It wasn't a hotel room with heavy curtains and complicit mirrors. It wasn't rain. It wasn't wine. It wasn't that theatrical sin that I sometimes sought just to feel alive. It was light, warm, late April morning. And a man who didn't look like the others. He wasn't more handsome, nor younger, nor more mysterious. On the contrary, he was calm. Almost banal. But there was a calmness in his eyes that didn't worry me. He was resting me. I met him in a park. Simple, on a bench where I was drinking my coffee. He was reading. We exchanged a few words. The next day, we met again. It wasn't flirting. Not in the sense that I knew. It was something else, a kind of silence between two beings who felt the same emptiness at the same time. The third time, I asked him if he wanted to go up to the apartment with me. He wasn't surprised. He didn't ask why. He just said, yes. I had no expectations and no fantasies. I wanted nothing more than to be touched. But what happened was different. Less about the body and more about what I was letting happen. He didn't ask me what I liked. He didn't dominate me. He didn't provoke me. He held my hand. It was the first time someone had caressed my palms before touching my hips. The first time someone had kissed my ankles, my forehead, my elbow. The first time a man had looked at me while saying my name, not to seduce me, but to understand me. In the midst of that intimacy, I wasn't lost. I found myself. And I knew it was the last time. Not because I was no longer capable of desire. Not because shame gripped me. But because that moment had been complete. In it, there was no longer any need for escape, from the mask, from someone else. And him, finally, I was whole. We lay naked on the bed. The light entered through the blinds and formed stripes on our bodies. I didn't feel guilt. Nor exultation. Just a strange peace, which I had never experienced. Before I started talking. About myself. Not in details, not with dirty confessions or confessions. Just simple truths. I'm not looking for love, I told him. I'm looking for peace in my body. He smiled. Maybe you just found it was the last time we saw each other. No message, no promise. Nothing to continue. Just that moment, pure, closed in on itself like a music box that closes after playing the last note. After him, I felt like I had told myself everything. Not out loud. With my body. With the silences. With my gaze. For the first time, I didn't leave that room feeling divided. I no longer needed to make excuses. I didn't tremble that I would be caught. I didn't wonder what my husband, the priest, my friends, God would think. It was just me. The last lover was, in fact, a witness. Of the end. Of my transformation. I closed the door behind him and started to cry. Not out of sadness. Not out of regret. I was crying because I knew. I no longer had to search. I no longer had to burn in secret. I no longer have to lie to myself that every new man will heal something that was never a wound but a lack of understanding. I can't go back in time and change what I did. But I can move forward without repeating myself. He was the last lover, not because he was the best. Not because something dramatic happened. But because, that morning, I offered myself what I had sought in so many other bodies, validation. Acceptance. An unconditional peace. My husband doesn't know this detail yet. Maybe he never will. But between me and myself I know, everything that was in those years of double life ended not in tears or scandal, but in silence and a warm room. With a gentle man. With a wordless goodbye. Maybe not all people need such roads to find themselves. Maybe for some, fidelity is simpler. For me it wasn't. For me, it was a labyrinth of feelings, shame, doubt and searches that left me, sometimes, with an empty soul. But from all those moments, I learned who I am. And now, when I look at myself in the mirror again, I no longer see a woman running away, but one who returns. Chapter 23. Choose me or leave me. I repeated the words dozens of times in my mind. Every night, when he slept peacefully with his back turned to me, I imagined what it would be like. What I would tell him. How would she react if she screamed, if she cried, if she hated me? But, most of all, I imagined how I would feel, naked. exposed, without shields. That morning, the sky was grey and the city was breathing heavily, like a beast waking up. It wasn't a right day for a confession. But it never is. He made the coffee like every day. He put the cup on my table without looking at me. "Can we talk?" I asked, and my voice was calm. It was the only part of me that didn't tremble. He looked at me for a moment, then sat down. He knew, he felt. And I began. With the truth. With everything. I didn't apologize. I didn't defend myself. I didn't try to justify my every gesture, every night spent in other arts. I just told him that I was different than I thought I could be. That I got lost. That I looked for myself in the wrong places. That I loved him, but I couldn't give myself completely. That my body rebelled against the silence. That I was two women in one, that I was tired of lying. His tears didn't come right away. They were like a fog that silently gathered around his eyes. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't ask with whom. Nor when. Nor why me. He just said, "Why now?" I remained silent for a few seconds. Then I answered, "Because I don't want to live apart from myself anymore. Because, if I want to love you honestly, I have to be whole. And to be whole, I have to tell everything." It hurt him. I felt it in every tense muscle of his, in the way he held his cup without drinking from it, in the jerky rise of his chest. But he didn't run away. He stayed. "And what do you want from me now?" he asked in a low voice, as if barely held in check. I took a deep breath. "I don't want your pity. I don't want a trial. Nor for you to forgive me for the sake of appearances. I want you to choose me, if you still can. Or to leave me. But don't cling to a woman who wasn't whole with you." It was a painful gamble. But it was the first time I had given him freedom. Until then, I had only given him halves of me and asked him to treat them as a whole. He stood up and began to walk around the room. Even, rhythmic steps. I thought. I left him. I didn't ask him to answer then. Didn't want a reaction born of anger or impulse. I wanted a decision. "I felt you away for a long time," he said, looking out the window. "But I didn't know how to come after you. You never asked for my help. I didn't even know I could." He smiled bitterly. "When you wanted another man, you knew. But when you wanted to be okay here, you never asked if I could be part of the healing." His words were more painful than any cry. Because he was right. "I loved you," I told him. "I still love you. But I am not what you thought I was." I know that we looked at each other for a long time. Silent. And for the first time, after so many months or maybe years, there was no wall between us. There was pain, but it was clear. There was silence, but it was sincere. "Is this the last adventure?" he asked me. "Yes. Not because you caught me. But because I found myself." He closed his eyes. "I need time," he said. I nodded. "Take it. But you know now. There is nothing hidden anymore. You are free to stay or to leave." He stood there, motionless, for minutes. Then he came closer. He didn't touch me. He just said, "It's hard to choose you, knowing that someone else held you. But it would be even harder to lose you, knowing that I still want you. I don't know what I'll do. But thank you for not lying to me today." He left the room. I heard him close the bedroom door. I stayed on the couch. I wasn't crying. There was a strange silence inside me, as if, after years of running away, someone had stopped me and told me, "Now you can breathe." For the first time, I was no longer a victim of my own desires. I was a woman who had assumed her shadows. Who chose the light, not because it was easier, but because it was the only straight path to the truth. Maybe she will choose me. Maybe she won't. But whatever the answer, I know it's an answer to who I really am. Not to my mask. Not to the role of wife. Not to guilt. But to the complete being that I finally had the courage to show. Choose me or leave me. But choose the truth. Chapter 24. Together, differently. It was strange at first. Not dramatically, not suddenly. But strange, as if I had entered a familiar house, but everything had been moved a few centimeters to the right. Everything was in its place, but nothing was the way it had been. Time had passed. Time in which he thought, in which I waited. I didn't press him, I didn't ask him, I just let him feel, when he came towards me again. One morning in which autumn was gently tapping on the windows with its fine rain, there was a gentleness in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years. "I want to try. But differently. Without pretense. Without guilty silences." I felt a wall fall from my chest. "I can't be the woman I used to be," I told him. He nodded. And I can no longer be the man who thought that being physically present was enough to love. It was the first time we made love after I told him everything. It wasn't a rematch. It wasn't a consolation. It was a sincere, awkward touch. Like a first meeting between two people who have known each other their whole lives and yet are only now looking at each other with wide eyes. We held each other after he stroked my hair, and I looked at him in silence. I had nothing to hide anymore. There was no longer a wall between my body and my heart. Reconstruction is not a straight path. We didn't become a happy couple again overnight. It was hard. It was uncomfortable. We started talking. Not just about work, children, bills, but about desires, fantasies, needs. I told myself everything. That sometimes, in the arms of others, I was only looking for a mirror. That I wanted to be seen. The touch wasn't just skin. It was recognition. Confirmation. It was the way the cry inside me turned into a moan. Have you ever wanted me? Or just what I meant? He asked me one evening. I wanted you. But I also hid from you. Because I didn't want you to see me hungry. I was ashamed. He smiled sadly. And I thought you were cold. That you didn't want. That you didn't need me. The truth, told at the right time, doesn't hurt. It heals. We started therapy, together this time, but also separately. I discovered that I wasn't the only one who had hidden parts. He also had shadows. Insecurities, fears, expectations buried in inherited silences. We learned to speak without guilt. I want to touch you, I told him one evening. Touch me like a man, not a husband, he replied. There was a nuance there, a request for real intimacy, not roles. Not husband and wife, but man to man, skin to skin. Without a mask, we started to discover sex again. Not as an obligation, not as a marital duty, but as a new language that we were learning together. We laughed in bed, we were clumsy, we told each other what we liked, what turned us on, what scared us. We also had bad days. Days when the past stung us like a thorn hidden under the skin, in which he retreated, in which I felt guilty. But I didn't run away, I stayed. I learned to stay in discomfort without running away into silence. Slowly we started sleeping together again. Not out of reflex, but out of desire. We redecorated the bedroom, we changed the linens, the pillows, the lighting. Not because space mattered, but because we wanted to symbolically mark our new beginning point. One evening, he asked me, "Do you still have fantasies?" I looked at him with fear. Then I smiled. "Yes, a lot." "Are you telling me?" I felt a door opening for me that I had always kept closed. I told him. About women. About strangers. About shame transformed into desire. About control and vulnerability. About curiosity. "You're not broken," he told me. Just intense. I melted into his words. He didn't judge me, he listened to me. And he told me what turned him on. What he wanted, but never asked for. Because he didn't know he was allowed to want either. We started making love with our eyes open. Let's tell each other now what we want. Let's ask for each other. Let's give each other. Without shame. It wasn't a repair. It was a reconstruction. From the ground up, I learned that love is not guaranteed. That it is asked for. Daily. That it must be maintained, like a fire. And that desire is not betrayal. It is energy. Sometimes uncontrolled, but never bad. One day, while we were having breakfast, he said to me, "Thank you for having the courage to stop lying to me. Without that truth, I wouldn't be able to hear. With us as we are now." I looked at him. And I knew, we are together. But differently. We were no longer a couple that mimics happiness. We were two people who had seen each other in the cruelest emptiness of the soul and had chosen each other again. With wounds, with desires, with shadows. Together no longer meant comfort. It meant courage. Sincerity. Acceptance. Maybe not all stories like mine end here. Maybe others break. Maybe not all men stay. Not all women come back. But I chose to be true. And he chose to love me like that. It's not an ending, it's an awakening. It's a love that is written from scratch. With truth, with touch, with conscious choices. Chapter 25. A Woman's Confession. Dear woman, perhaps you will judge me. Perhaps you will understand me, or perhaps you will close this book with a bitter smile, asking yourself, what kind of woman is this? I am not writing to you to apologize. Not to ask for your forgiveness, sympathy, or pity. I'm writing to you because, if you have come this far, perhaps you too have had nights when you hid your desires in the pillow wet with tears. Maybe you've asked yourself, am I bad because I want more? Am I spoiled because gentle love isn't enough for me if my body is screaming for fire? My truth is simple and hard to bear. I didn't choose between love and desire. And I don't think we have to choose. I was raised in a world that told me to be good, to be loyal, modest, faithful, to love one man, to sit quietly in his arms and stifle the rest of my voice inside me. I hid my body, but not my fantasies. I fed them in silence. I forbade myself from touching, but not my thoughts. And one day, my thoughts became gestures. Shame, some would say. Salvation, I would say now. I lived a double life, wife by day, flame by night. I loved a gentle man and cheated on him. Not out of hatred. Not out of lack of love. But because a part of me couldn't die in silence. Desire was not an accident. It was a voice, living part of me that refused to be ignored. I lived my guilt. I took on my shame. I learned what it's like to feel empty in the arms of someone who loves you and to feel whole in the arms of a stranger. I felt tears on my cheeks as I moaned with pleasure. I was a mother, a wife, a lover, and sometimes none of these things. Just a woman. Hungry. Tired. Lost. And one day I said to myself, I don't want to lie anymore. I told myself the truth. I told it to myself first. Then to my husband. Then to the therapist. Then to you. Here, I'm not a role model. I'm not a victim. I'm just a woman who didn't want to split in two anymore. Because the world asks us to be good. And if we want more, we're told that we're easy. That if we let ourselves be touched by more than one hand, we're told that we lose our value, as if our body were a treasure to keep, not a window through which we express our thirst for life. I don't want to live in shame anymore, to ask for forgiveness because I feel. Because I want. Because I moan, because I vibrate, because I like to be looked at, to be desired, to be conquered again and again, even by the same man. I'm writing to tell you that you can be honest. You can want love and sex. Gentleness and passion. Calm and explosion. You don't have to choose a life that dries you up inside just because it has to be that way. You can say, it's not enough for me, without that meaning you're not grateful. You can ask. You can refuse. You can explore. I don't know what your life is like. Maybe you're single. Maybe you're married. Maybe you're lying to yourself. Maybe you stopped dreaming a long time ago. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that every truth spoken liberates. And every silence, if it lasts too long, locks you in your own prison. I told myself the truth. I looked in the mirror and said to myself, this is me. Not perfect. Not pure. But alive. Hot. True. I forgave myself. I loved myself. And I let him too see. I live differently now. Sometimes I hurt about the past and my choices. But I'm no longer ashamed of who I am. Because if I've understood anything in all these years of hidden loves and inner ruins, it's that longing for yourself is the hardest thing to bear. Not the longing for others, but the longing for you, the whole woman, who looks in the mirror and no longer asks herself, is what I am too much? I am more. And you are. Choose the truth, not the mask. Choose to feel, not to punish yourself. Choose to forgive yourself, even when no one else does. Because women like me are no longer silent. And if you're like me, you're not alone. With sincerity, a woman who found herself in pieces, but who forgave herself whole. Epilogue. If you've made it this far, it means you've stayed by my side through every flinch, every lie, every stolen touch, and every unanswered question. And for that, I thank you. I'm no cleaner than I was at the beginning. I haven't become a role model. I haven't burned my desires on the altar of forgiveness. But I've learned to look them in the face, to stop burying them. To stop calling them sins when they're just shadows of unfulfilled needs. I hurt my husband, I hurt myself, I lived my life in two realities that only touched in dreams. I'm not proud of anything I've done, but I no longer carry that heavy shame that made me freeze in silence. I finally understood that it's not love and desire that are mutually exclusive, but fear that separates them. The fear of being honest. The fear of being rejected for what I am. The fear of being wanted too much or too little. The fear of not being enough or being too much. Now, I live differently. I no longer run, I no longer lie. I learn, day after day, to be whole, even if my whole does not resemble what I was told I should be. This book was not a cry for pity. It was a mirror. And if you saw something of yourself in it, please, do not hate yourself for it. Among us women, there are many silent stories, many unspoken feelings, many desires stifled by shame. I chose to speak. Maybe I am not an example. But I am a voice. And sometimes, the voice is all we have left.